I was just rereading the Iliad to kind of go with today. Although I feel like there's so much leading that Madeline didn't do. But we could talk about that. I mean, I don't think there was too much show news. There's just the thing you sent me today of Becky saying that the kids are all speaking somewhere.
Yeah, at the children's Emmys.
Hmm.
The children's Emmys award ceremony is on Friday, and the trio are all like presenting awards along with the 16 awards that the show is up for.
Yeah.
And so she was being excited that they were all presenting. The other thing from the show is the book thing that I'm just ignoring. So there was a book that one of those like a graphic novel for Sea of Monsters that they're putting out like a newer version of it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and they did. I'm ignoring it because they did the same thing around the same time. Like date wise, it's not supposed to come out until like the beginning of November, and I'm ignoring that because I don't want to have to wait that long for this show to come out. And and like honestly, any other year, I would be like, you know what? It sucks that the show isn't going to come out till the very end of the year, but I can handle it. How are we supposed to survive Trump until December? Like, do you know how long that is in Trump time? That is like a 17 generations. How am I supposed to survive almost an entire year of him being president with before something like this that I'm really looking forward to actually comes out and I can watch it? And so I'm just like ignoring it because I'm like, I don't like that I have to wait this long, so I'm just gonna pretend like it's not going to happen that late in the year until I have no choice but to acknowledge that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, thinking of like this year ending, I mean, it feels like it still just began. I know we're already into March, but it's still so early in the year.
Yeah. It's only been like it hasn't even been 2 months that he's been president. It's only been like it'll be 2 months on March 20th. It's we've already gone through like 75 different lifetimes. Like in those 2 months, he's threatened to turn like the power off in the state that I live in like 4 different times. and, and
Yeah.
he's just gonna keep doing that, and along with whatever else he decides to do.
I mean,
Um,
the longer that gets pushed off, at least you're not going to be stuck with no power in the cold. That's all I can hope.
yeah, since now it's almost nicer out, whatever that means for the Midwest. It shouldn't be that bad anymore, but it is just a ridiculous thing. And I
Yeah.
was just like, okay, fine. I'm gonna have to find like the will to live for an entire year dealing with all of this insanity before something like that comes out that makes me be excited about something
Yeah.
all over again. Fine.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and I hope that we get, I know that they're starting to tease season three, but I've been thinking about this, and the thing that I'm most looking forward to with season three is there being zero way to compare it to the movies. And I know
mhm.
that the movies aren't even the same thing, but we both get it in our comments sometimes of like, well, I actually did enjoy that movie. And it's like, okay, there's not going to be one for Titan's Curse. This is going to be our last one of, well, they should have taken this element from the movies, or they should have done this thing from the movies.
Mhm.
Really, the only thing that people seem to want from the Sea of Monster movies, though, are the cheesy lines, or Luke's bad acting. I did confirm with people that they like it because of the bad acting, not
Okay,
because
good.
that good. Yeah, so I don't know if this was a neurodivergent thing. Shannon and I both didn't watch the movies until very recently, so we weren't aware the fandom was so in love with the line from Sea of Monsters of "Get off my roof," or like Luke is just bantering with Percy while he's on his yacht, and it's said so flat, and that's why I was like, "Why do people love this line? I don't get it." And it's just because it feels out of place and silly. Like that's
Mm.
the whole reason.
It's all so out of place and so weird. And oh, that was one thing that literally came out like today was there was an interview with John Steinberg, I think. One of I can never remember their names. The two executive like showrunners basically for Percy Jackson, and he was doing an interview before the Emmys, and he was just like talking in general about the show, and they just mentioned season 3, and they basically said like we're talking about it, but nothing's like, obviously nothing's like official yet. But he
Mhm.
basically said like when we left Vancouver this time, we were pretty sure that we're going to be back, and like that's not how they felt after season 1 at all.
Yeah.
um and so that's like, duh. Like they're like the most popular show last year. Why would Disney just all of a sudden be like, never mind?
Yeah.
But it does give them, and the fact that they have a writer's room, like this is like little like things about like Hollywood, but like for season after season 1, when they were working on season 2, they likely did some of that work without probably fully like getting paid the way that they should be. But because Disney gave them like an okay to have like a writer's room, that usually means that like it's officially like a job, and the writers are getting like fully paid for like that amount of work and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
so that's probably like that's some of the difference of why it's good that they were given one right away instead of having to write like 3 or 4 scripts before they gave them one. Um,
Yeah. And
because
these
they
seasons like flow into each other. Like as you've been saying, it's not a full year, a full school year. We're getting in between these, it's a few months. And we go straight from, like the aftermath of what happens with Talia, like getting untreeified. And like we jump straight into that. So this season has to lead nicely into that.
Yeah,
And
and Walker at the like the Savannah School of Art and Design thing where he answered some questions about the show, he did say that the season ends in like a more dark way to like foreshadow a much darker season 3. And like the way that I would imagine it at this moment of my life is imagining like Thalia coming back and her asking what happened to Luke, or like where he is, and somebody like Chiron having to explain to her like what happened,
yeah.
and then perhaps like showing him fully being like taken over by Kronos basically,
Or
or
maybe
just
we'll see him get taken over. Like if it's gonna be dark, that's what my brain goes to right away is are we gonna
yeah.
see some sort of ritual?
There's like the thing that's like interesting to think about with that is that there's a lot of different things they could show that show it to be darker, even just with him. Like they could show him like losing, like giving himself up in that way. Um, they could show like like flashback stuff of him and like foreshadowing things that happen like now, um, with like Thalia and all that kind of stuff that people wouldn't know about until she was back. And now that she is back, that kind of stuff can be like discussed again. There's just so many things like that with him that they could easily show as a way to show like just how like far gone he is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to get ready for season 3 when he's torturing people. So either way, it's exciting. What was the other question from that article was them just talking about child actor stuff, and they were basically saying like how was it having a cast of all kids and how was it getting used to balancing that since they have to have certain times off and things like that for school or whatever else. And the answer I really liked was just basically that they promised their parents, like their families, that this would be a production that wouldn't like work them to death. Basically, they didn't say that, but that's essentially what they were saying, was that they understand that these are children that also have to go to school and have friends at home and siblings at home and lives at home that they're like not seeing when they're doing this production, and so they're gonna like respect that by not forcing them to work more than they really should, and just figuring out a way. And the thing he also said was something about like that the kids on that are playing these characters are going through similar things in their own lives as their characters are, and so they want to respect them by having them, you know, by not treating them the way that Hollywood usually treats kids.
Yeah.
So that's always nice to read, especially one of those interviews that Walker did. He mentioned that just like little things about how this like actually works when they're on set, like that it they have to be taken away from school to school for 20 minutes for it to count towards the school that they have to do every day on set.
Mhm.
And so he was saying that if I'm only in there for 15 minutes and then they come and get me, it doesn't count. And it has to eventually like add up to like 3 hours of time every day when they're on set, where they're in school. Like they have to like legally have them do 3 hours of school every day when they're on set. And I was like, that must be really hard for like him specifically, being like the star or whatever. It just must be challenging for them to find like 3 hours every day on set. Like I know sets take a long time between scenes and stuff, but still, that definitely would be a balancing act of sorts. And I'm like, that must be really difficult to like schedule.
Mhm.
How because just from the things that I've done with theater, like things do not run on time all the time, and it's also like you don't know like when something is just going to start working. And
Mhm.
so it's like sometimes something isn't working, like, and then also it just starts working, and you're like, okay, we have to film this scene now, and it's like, oh, but wait, our like stars are supposed to be in school right now, but we just have to pull them out of it early and make up for this later because we have to do this scene right now. It's like that kind of stuff, and that would be challenging. But I'm that's why every season takes like 8 months to film, um, because they actually give them the time that they're supposed to, and they don't break the rules,
Yeah.
which I greatly appreciate.
Yes. Yeah. It's nice to not feel guilty about that as we're watching the kids.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm trying to think because like I posted a video like jokingly weeks ago that still is getting a lot of views. It's Luke getting eaten. And it was just me making a silly joke of what's Kronos' favorite snack. It's his descendants because I love that line of him going my favorite. Um, and just today, I had a Luke defender, and it was like, oh, I hated this scene in the movies because Luke gets no redemption this way. I was just like, girlie, you don't even know who you're starting it with to say Luke gets a redemption arc at all. Like, first of all,
No, he doesn't. That's like a whole other subject, honestly. The like the what a redemption arcs actually are. Um, I don't know what's happened in the last however many years, but that's become like a thing where people say that they're getting one. They're not getting one.
yeah.
Like a horrible person being nice for 10 minutes doesn't mean that they've been like redeemed. Like Snape in Harry Potter was never redeemed. He just,
That's
you
something
just,
good to talk about.
oh yeah, yeah, we'll talk about that in a second when I'm done talking about this. But yeah, it's, like Snape was not like ever redeemed. Maybe in J.K. Rowling's like twisted little mind he was, but for most people who have morals, he was not. And, and like Luke was never redeemed. He just lost. That's not being redeemed though, of realizing that you lost and taking yourself out. But and like what's his face, Kylo Ren. I
Mhm.
don't consider that a redemption arc either, because even though he realized that he was wrong, because his mom died basically, um, he didn't like fully. You have to like actually, be Zuko. You have to like do something like that. Like you have to like apologize to the people you hurt. Like all that Kylo did was he showed up for 10 minutes and like was there to bring Rey back to life, and then he was dead and gone and goodbye. Like he never actually like had to deal with any of the ramifications of his choices. And I'm glad that he fell into a hole, the most important part of the movie, and then just died, because go away. I don't care about you. But it is like those are not redemption arcs. It's just somebody who's being the worst person, they stop for 10 minutes. But that's not the same thing. You have to actually like do something that shows that you're redeemable or have any redeemable qualities. None of those characters did anything to say that they do.
Mhm.
Like they just stopped the like absolute like destruction and violence they were causing everywhere they went. Like that's like saying that my dad was redeemed because his brain ate himself when he died. It's like no, he just stopped talking.
Yeah.
because his brain wouldn't let him talk anymore. Like that's not he didn't never said sorry or never did any of that kind of stuff or anything that he did. He just couldn't physically speak anymore. That doesn't count.
Exactly, yeah. And I mean it's so hollow, especially to like us millennials, because we have Zuko as a blueprint, because we have this amazing redemption story that like literally, can you think of a better one? Like none of us can. If you were in the generation that watched Avatar live on Nickelodeon, you cannot think of a better redemption arc.
Yeah,
It's
and
just
even if you like anime, like
yeah.
redemption arc on My Hero Academia, a popular one is Bakugo, and it is a redemption arc. Like he's god awful. He's a horrible just bully and like just horrendous to the main character, and it takes like seasons of the show before he starts being nicer, and he does do a whole redemption arc where he apologizes to people for how he was treating them and he stops treating them that way and things like, and like I still don't like him. I will never like him as a character because of how horrible he was for a long time, that I just, that's one of those things with a character like that, is that some people will never get over that. And even though he's much better by the time the show like ended very recently, you still like don't, I still like don't want anything to do with him because of how bad he was. And that's part of like how people respond. Like sometimes even when you realize that you made a mistake and you're sorry, sometimes that doesn't mean that they just like want to have anything to do with you anymore. Sometimes people still don't want anything to do with you even after you say that you're sorry. And so like that was a good version of that, but like the other things that we just mentioned, they don't do any of that stuff. They don't like give people a chance to be like mad at them or even anything at all. They just like, most of them actually just die.
Yeah. Well, and to like use this to bridge into Snape. So it was announced recently. There's a new Harry Potter project because nobody wants to work with J.K. Rowling anymore from the original cast, and they announced the actor who is going to play Snape is a black man. I haven't seen him in any other acting. This has nothing to do with his acting. This has to do with our analysis of Snape as a character, which is like if there is any character we are going to add more diversity into because we know J.K. Rowling sucks at writing diversity, why does it have to be this character? Why does it have to be the character that A, joins a Nazi organization, B, has a child that is so afraid of him that he is his boggart, C, tortures children throughout the books, and I mean, like, there's more, of course, but like, why this character? Why couldn't it be like McGonagall or Hagrid? Hagrid, we could get some nice commentary on like on discrimination there if we did it. Just kind of like how we're gonna get interesting conversations about discrimination, Annabeth versus the Cyclops in our next season. So like I'm pissed. I'm pissed that they're doing this because I'm pissed for that actor. He does not deserve this. And I know there's a little bit of agency in he's accepting the role, but like you can't really turn down a role.
Yeah, and there isn't, I know that there's like an official like media analysis term for this, but I don't know what it is and I keep forgetting to look it up. But there is a term for like malicious, I'm just going to call it like malicious diversity. And by that I mean like this feels very obvious to me that it's like J.K. Rowling knows that this is something that people say they want from her. And so she's giving it to us in the worst possible way. And so then when we're upset about Snape being black, she's like, well, you guys are never going to be happy no matter what I do. So I'm just going to go back to making all the characters white all the time. Or you like look at like the intolerant left is never happy. It's like that sort of stuff is the things that I know she's going to say. And it's like, yeah, because you're purposely choosing somebody that you know is the worst character. Like there is an entire storyline throughout the majority of the books of this entire book series where literally everyone else in the book, like all of the kids, the other like parents, like teachers at the school even, they all don't understand why Dumbledore hasn't fired Snape. And it is a storyline for multiple books, for like at least 5 of the 7 books that I can remember,
Yeah.
that people don't understand why he doesn't fire Snape. And is like wants them, everyone wants him to fire Snape, and nobody understands why he lets him stay there. Nobody understands why he still lets him teach these kids when he's like borderline abusing them, basically are abusing them. And and then at the end they do this like whole ridiculous reveal that because he was a stalker to like Harry's mother and called her a racial slur, that means that for some reason that he like let him stay there as like a thing of like, oh, I this person messed up a lot, but I'm like giving them a chance. And it's like, are you making the character who everyone wants to be fired but and nobody understands why, because of how bad they're being to everyone around them, and then you try to do this reveal at the end to like explain why? Are you making that character black? And like not only like black, like a dark skinned black man. Like, are you kidding me? You're making a black person be the character that everyone wants to be fired because they're bad at their job and nobody understands. You're literally doing a diversity hire storyline by making him black. And that's like the like honestly that's like the nicest sort of thing that you can think about that happens with Snape. Like, you're making like a dark skinned black person be part of a Nazi organization.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. And
And does that
yeah,
mean that he like yells a racial slur at a white woman? Like, it's just like it's like that sort of a stuff of like that's disgusting. Like, and the Percy, the Harry Potter thing, it makes me upset to also think about all of the kids that will be cast in this, because people are going to be really upset at anybody who plays these parts at all, because everyone knows that they're just making it to try to make any money off of this because everyone hates J.K. Rowling. And so those kids are going to be like put in like this firestorm of all these different opinions. Even just people that are ridiculous and don't care about J.K. Rowling, they're going to be upset because they're remaking these movies that they people already really like. And then on top of it, they, because of what she stands for and what the movie even are about overall, and it's like those children, no children should be put in the middle of that mess. And you're putting a bunch of them into that mess, and that's going to be like something in their career forever that they played these parts. And they shouldn't do that. Like, nobody should be putting them through that just because you want to make some money from a brand you spent a lot of money buying and nobody wants it anymore.
yeah, the whole thing, like, I just wish J.K. Rowling would shut up, honestly. Like, I mean, that would have saved everything, right? If she would have just shut up years ago. But
Yeah.
it's what's disappointing, especially like, and this is just disappointing in general, not just the Snape thing, is finding out who J.K. Rowling really is as an adult, because so many of us, this was the first book series where, like, almost how we're talking about Percy Jackson, where we started analyzing media that way, media meant for us as younger adults. And so to have the blueprint for that for a lot of us, like, turn into this mess, it just feels so awful. And I want the franchise to die out at this point, just because like there's nothing she could say or do that's ever gonna make it better.
Mm-mm. Well, it's like we always say this about it, but it is like the white liberal story. And
Yes.
so it's just very lacking in like anything, in like emotional depth, like character depth, like analysis, like gigantic plot holes that don't make any sense. Like the my favorite joke when people compare it to Percy Jackson is that like Voldemort would have been like somebody that they would have gotten rid of in 2 chapters, and then they would have moved on. It wouldn't even been somebody for an entire book, most likely, because it's just not they deal with much bigger issues. I guess it's the best way to put that.
Yeah.
Um, but it is just like the way. Actually, Becky Riordan was posting in response to something in the last like week where um, they were talking about something else, but she mentioned that she stops. She doesn't post articles where people mention that, and she just said like that other thing. She's like that other thing, that other like thing really upsets people, and so I don't post articles where they mention that thing anymore. And she was like obviously talking about Harry Potter, that she knows that it just makes people upset, knowing that like this thing is compared to that thing, and so she just doesn't mention it at all anymore. And because it just makes her uncomfortable that people compare this thing that they made to that. And it's, but that's exactly how it feels. It's like, ew. Like this is something that actually follows through with like, um I don't know. The whole way to like sum this whole thing up with those two things is like, people say, tend to say this is like, Rick Riordan is who you thought J.K. Rowling was before people realized who she was, or like the books even finished, or
Yeah.
anything like that. Like he actually is that person. When she was like trying to get away with that, like I'll never get over the fact that she lied about how poor she was. Um,
Yeah.
that like that actually hurt my feelings, because I am actually a very poor person and was very poor my entire life. Like I can remember from the time that I was like 8, knowing that my parents didn't have any money and being worried about money and things like that. That granted, I know I shouldn't have been worried about, but I was, because I just knew that we didn't have any. And yeah, and so I grew up really poor, and so when I was in high school when Harry Potter movies came out. I was a junior in high school the year that the first one came out for like Thanksgiving. And so reading articles at the time where she said that she was like really poor and unemployed and wrote this story and was able to make it big gave me like hope at the time that I
Yeah.
could do that. And then to find out like many years later that that was all a lie, that she was living, she chose to work part-time. She didn't have to work part-time. She chose to work part-time so that she could spend the rest of her time writing her book. And so she chose to do that. She chose to take like financial assistance in the UK when most people take that because they have nothing else. And she chose to take that so that she could spend her time trying to write this like passion project book. She lived in an apartment that was above like the coffee shop that she talks about that her family owned. And so her family gave her that apartment basically. And so it's like that is not the same at all. Like, do you know how easy my life would be? Especially like last year I made $11,000 for the entire year, and that includes when I got hired at a job and started working at one from like the middle of October to the end of the year. I made like $8,000 for the rest of the year. Do you know how easy my life last year would have been if I didn't have to worry about paying rent or like buying food or anything at all, because my family just gave me some, and I could have like spent my time like doing the stuff we were doing anyway, but without like the incredible amount of like anxiety at every moment that I didn't have enough money to pay rent and I couldn't eat if my mom wasn't in town to buy me food and things like that. Like that would have been so easy. And so it was just horrible that she came up with that as a way to make people like her, to be like, oh, I struggled. And it's like, you didn't actually, though, but the rest of us actually do. And you made me believe that like, you made a lot of us, like, poor people believe that we could be somebody like her. And then to find out, like, that all was a lie and that you can't do that. It's just,
I don't want to say you can't, but like it's incredible. Like those
yeah.
stories are so much more rare because like we were told it was rare that it happened with her.
Hmm.
It's so much more rare than we thought because it did not even happen with her. Like that's the
Yeah.
truth.
And if you want to keep like comparing, like Rick Riordan and Becky did not have any money either. He was the only one working for a few years of their lives, and he was a teacher. Like they moved back to Texas from San Francisco because they couldn't afford to live there, under his like one salary. But like they've been even talking about, like he was, whatever you call it on Blue Sky, like he was posting, I guess is what we'll call it because there's no word for it yet, on Blue Sky, talking about how he was remembering that there was a day when he was working on two manuscripts, like working every single day, and that he's like, and he says like, me and Becky realized that the kids were both at school, so we like could go out to lunch and like relax because they were basically always working. Like he was either working as a teacher or he was working in his free time writing these books. And like they work on these things together. It's not like she's not involved in any of the story at all. And so they went, and he said when they went out to eat, somebody like recognized him and told him to go back and like finish writing. And but it's like that's like an actual real version. Like they didn't have any money. They moved back home because they didn't have any money, and they were working like for years and years and years on end. Even when the books first started coming out, they would like go on like, you know, the tours and stuff like that together, but they would like pay for some of it themselves. Hardly anybody would come when they first started. It took like many years for the books to actually become like popular and things like that. And so that's like an actual more real life version of how that stuff can happen, that it takes like years and years and years of work before you can get any like amount of like real success, where he like stopped working as like a high school teacher and started just making money just being an author. That took a long time and a lot of work before that ever happened. It wasn't like this overnight thing like it was like J.K. Rowling literally like spent a year of her life writing this book and then suddenly had like this huge deal, and just like never had to worry about anything ever again after that. And that's just like not how most people live.
Yeah. And to go back with, I don't think this is the literary term that you're looking for, but the malicious compliance of making Snape a diversity, like, kind of higher in this. Like, it feels so icky saying that, but, you know, like making Snape the diverse character in this round. Like, with Rick, you don't have any sort of sense that he doesn't understand even his own morals. With J.K. Rowling, you're left questioning, how do you think Snape is a good person at the end? Because, like, it's very clear that for her, this isn't malicious compliance. This isn't like, oh yeah, I'm making the worst character. For her, she actually thinks Snape is great because she had her main character name his child after him. Like,
Yeah.
um, no, we were reading the same Snape lady, and you wrote him. What happened?
Yeah, and I feel like this is like a whole thing where when we talk about Luke and when we talk about
Yeah.
Calypso, the overall thing that people, why there's always videos being made about those two characters is because there are people out there who think that they did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
And like that goes against like the narrative of the books, but there are lots of people who legitimately think that, and that's why people never stop talking about them, because that's scary to imagine that people could read that stuff and think that those characters didn't do anything wrong. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's the same sort of thing that like when you read the Percy Jackson books, you know that like even if you yourself want Luke to be like redeemed, he's never actually redeemed. You can like find a way to twist it around in your head to make that fit, but it's not it's not really how you want it to be in that sort of a way, you know? Um and but like I guess the best way I know how to like describe the difference between how those characters in this and in this are handled is like you said, like J.K. Rowling wrote that story for Snape legitimately thinking that telling everybody how he treated Lily would like redeem him for all of the things that he did for all of those decades of his life. And she legitimately thought that. Like she legitimately thought that showing him that and showing him stuff with Dumbledore during that book would somehow redeem both of those characters, because otherwise why have him name his children after them? Like she legitimately thought that. She's like the people who are like Calypso didn't do anything wrong, or Luke is a hero, and you can't tell me otherwise. He's not that different from Percy, and it's like it's but like this book series is like no, that's not correct, and but like she actually like believes that
Yeah, she
and
believed.
thinks that, and it's just like that's why it's such like a crazy experience reading, especially that interacting with that storyline at all now, because it just, you can just tell that with everything that she writes, that that's how she sees like people like that. And it's just a fundamental complete misunderstanding of what is going on. Like, that's all you can really say about that, is like, when it's disorienting when I see people make videos about like Calypso saying that she didn't do anything wrong, that she has a reason to be upset at Percy and blah 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 blah.
Oh
It's
yeah, we could talk about like what happened with that this
oh yeah,
week.
yeah. Okay, so this, I swear to God, this story is like just like a sum up of like the last couple months for us, and I was just like, this is a ridiculous situation that all these different things could somehow come together in the same place. But anyway, so there's this one account that I would see some. There are Percy Jackson related accounts that I see all the time. I don't know. I'm weird with like how I follow people. That some, unless you make a video that I agree with so much that I want to follow you immediately. Sometimes it takes a while for me to do that,
Yeah.
because when you follow somebody, you see like every single video that they ever made ever, and I don't know if I like you that much, and but like this person was like around our age basically, and she was talking about how I would see these videos where she was reading through the book series, the Percy Jackson books, for the first time. And
Mhm.
so I like seeing videos like that people are making, but I usually don't follow them just because I just don't I don't want to, like, it's fun to see like the things that they think and
Mhm.
like notice. Like, she's the one who was talking about how she realized that Nico had a crush on Percy because Jason was like, why does he keep doing things for Percy when he says that he doesn't like him all the time? Like, that's the person whose video I saw saying that, where she realized that Nico was gay, because that's how people act like when you have crushes on people, especially when you're like an angsty little teenager. And
Mhm.
so, like, some of the stuff she said was like funny, but I just never want to engage in that stuff that much, because you have to be so careful about what you ever tell them, that it's not fun to, like, you can't really talk to them about anything because you'd be spoiling them about a bunch of stuff. But so the other night, like right before I went to bed, I saw a video from her where she was saying, she was reading House of Hades, and she was saying like, oh, Calypso's a complex character, but in this book she like turns down Gaia when Gaia wants her to join her, so she like redeeming herself. And I was like, if just not being involved with the maniacal villain means that you're redeemed, that's a really low bar to clear in general. But she was basically saying, like, I feel like the fandom hates her at a level that's like too much. Like, and she was like, is it just like a misogyny thing where like the fandom is hating on this character more than normal because it's a woman that is like the character, even if she's done bad things. She's like, some of the other like gods that are men and stuff like that have done things that are just as bad or similar or whatever. And so she said in the video like that she was asking the fandom
Literally made that
like
argument herself in the Odyssey, by the way.
and she was like giving, like saying like, I want your, she literally said in the video like, I want feedback from like the fandom. Why do you guys feel like this about Calypso? And so I left a comment in there saying like, it's because of the grooming.
Mhm.
And I think that it's like, I said something like, I think it's ridiculous to say that it's just from from misogyny. And I like said that because I'm like, this is not like a child
Yeah.
or anything. She's somebody our age. She's old enough to pick up on the themes of that, especially if she's read House of Hades and she's read Leo and her. There's a lot of things going on there that are not like a healthy relationship. And so I'm like, you're old enough to understand this stuff that's going on. And one thing I thought was funny was that when I saw the Calypso person who told me that I would not say these sort of things about her if I was a victim of grooming,
Wild.
and that I don't understand abuse, and
Oh god.
it like I literally just when people leave comments like that to me of all people on this planet, I like laugh and it's disorienting and then I just like laugh and be like, and I remember I responded to her and was like, you didn't watch any other video on my entire channel, did you? And it was just like it's just so wild to think that they just assume that I've never been groomed before, and I was like, yeah, actually I was groomed from the time that I was a child from my father, so maybe work on that. Like, yes, I know exactly what it's like to be groomed. Um, that was weird. But she was in that video saying, of course, like, the thing she said was, like, wild. Like, she said, like, that Calypso had every right to be mad at Percy for not rescuing her, and that Leo should be glad that she turned Gaia down. And I was just like, whoa, that's like an extreme statement, but she said that, and so I saw her say that, and I like laughed about it. I like took a screenshot of it. I'm like, of course you're here, like defending Calypso. That's so funny. And then I liked the video because I wanted to, if the person had like stitches or whatever on the next day, I wanted to like stitch it just to talk about how people talk about Calypso more because people act like she isn't grooming these minors, and that's something that actually happens in real life, that people like act like it's not happening, and it's scary how you can see a character doing that and like people act like it's not, like people talk about her all the time because there are still people that deny that it ever happened, and like people denying that it ever happened, that there isn't any problem with her, just makes you talk about it more because you're trying to get people to understand like why you're so afraid of her, why she's like a character that people have that strong feelings about.
Yeah.
And if people just like accepted that and didn't like argue with you over it, people wouldn't be so, they would be mad at her. But the reason why they're mad at her more than the other like god characters is because the other characters, people accept that. Like nobody is arguing that Zeus is actually a good person, and other characters like that. Like nobody's doing that with those people, and so we don't have to fight like this about it. Um, so the next morning I was like looking for it and I couldn't find it, and I was like, did she block me? And I was like, but I don't want to be like just like jump to that. Like so I like went and looked through like my watch history because I couldn't find it, and I was like, maybe I didn't like it so I could find it easier. And I looked back and I couldn't find it anywhere, and I was like, I think this woman blocked me. And I was like, so you don't actually want to know anything about, like, you don't actually want feedback of why people don't like Calypso, because this is the reason why people don't like Calypso, and you blocked me
Oh
for
my
saying
god.
that. And so I made like, you know, one of those burner accounts. I haven't had one of those in a while to just figure out if somebody actually blocked me or not. And so I did one of those just to see if like she really did. No, she really did. And I like found her username, was able to find that she really did block me. And the other Calypso person that made 7 videos about me in 12 hours was in the comment section of that video too. And I was just like, is this like, but I was like realizing like this is such like a, it's funny to me that somebody made a video being like, hey, Percy Jackson fandom, I want your feedback. Do you think that Calypso is hated on your fandom because of misogyny, or is there an actual reason for it? And all of the comments underneath the video are people supporting her like thing about that it's misogyny because she's blocking everybody else who makes anything that says anything different.
It's so unhinged.
And
It's
then
so unhinged.
the funniest thing ever about all of that is that I was like, who is this? Like, I just get curious about like, who is this person? And things like that, because she's like a classics-ish person who's talking about this stuff. And so I go and look and see that she has a podcast, and like I clicked on her, this is like the funniest thing that's ever happened to me. I like clicked on her like profile, and one of her like top videos, I was like, is that Jorge? Am I hallucinating? is that Jorge in one of her pinned videos? I was like, can that possibly? And it was one of those things like, this is like an autistic thing that sometimes I just like see things, but I don't. It doesn't really register. And so like 5 minutes later, I was like, does she know Jorge? Like from Epic does she know him? Did I see that, or did I just like imagine that? And so I went and clicked on her profile again and looked at her podcast, and he guested on like 5 episodes on her podcast talking about Epic the musical. They follow each other on Instagram. He follows 650 people, and she's one of them. And I was like, of course you're friends with Jorge. Of course. Of course. Of course, the person rereading the Percy Jackson books, that's a classic person, that blocked me because I said that Calypso is like grooming minors in this book and that's upsets people. Like, blocked, of course, she blocked me because she thinks it's just misogyny, is friends with Jorge. And I was just like, of course you guys know each other. Somehow. Of course that's what happened. This is like the most ridiculous thing that's ever happened to me. I was just like, how do they know each other? Oh.
Well, that is a nightmare blunt rotation. All of the fans and Jorge. Yeah, no, thank you.
I think the funniest part of that was she never did an episode on the Ithaca saga on her podcast, which I was like, that's funny. And the earlier episodes with him, she describes in like the description or whatever, she describes like Epic the Musical is a musical loosely based on the Odyssey. And I was like, oh, are you allowed to say that? And there are like people in like her Spotify comments that were like, they're like, it's not loosely based, it's based on the Odyssey, it's the same. And she's like, Jorge himself said that it's loosely based on the Odyssey. And I was like, do they know he said that?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So what I've decided from all of this, if because we did this huge episode where I was like, I'm going to pour all of my research into this. I am going to look up Ovid. I'm going to look up Caesar Augustus. I am going to talk about why Ovid is a valid person to talk about mythology from. We did a whole episode on that, right? We are going to do the same for Calypso once we get to Battle of the Labyrinth. It's just I want to have some sort of context to put her in first. But I'm just so fucking tired of the Calypso stuff with you. Like, to the point where, so one thing that Shannon brought up with me was like, oh, the Epic people are saying that Calypso didn't understand what Odysseus was saying when he said he was married because she doesn't understand marriage. She doesn't know what that is. Do you know what is on literally page 1 of the Odyssey in Greek? She wants Odysseus for a husband. The word, potus, husband, is in there. I know because 21-year-old Mandy translating that was like, why does she want him as a drink? Oh, wait, it's the other meaning of potus.
Oh man, yeah, we're gonna be done. Next week will be like the end of Song of Achilles, and then after that we're finally starting Battle of the Labyrinth, and there's so many things going on in that book just with grooming.
Yes.
Fuck. Not even just like Calypso, there's obviously that going on, but
And Beth Luke stuff that we're gonna
like the thing you, I guess if you agree with me or if you don't, that you can like look forward to in some strange way if you don't agree with me is that like my whole point about Calypso is that her in Battle of the Labyrinth is already like abusive. And people tend to be like, oh, I'm mad at her for the things she does in Heroes of Olympus. I'm like, that stuff is really bad. But that stuff is more understandable when you like see her clearly because of who she is. And this is like a whole thing, but it's fascinating to me that the Percy Jackson books are from his perspective. And so in other situations, people can acknowledge that his perspective is not completely accurate. Like, I don't know, the entirety of Titan's Curse, when he blames himself for everything, nobody's reading that book and it's like, yeah, it's your fault that Annabeth was kidnapped. It's your fault that Bianca like joined the Hunters. It's your fault that Bianca died. It's definitely your fault that all these bad things happen. You should definitely hold up the sky because you're gonna die anyway, so who cares if you die right here and now, I guess. Like, nobody is like thinking that about him. Nobody's like cheering on Athena for being like, you're not allowed to be friends with my daughter or anything like that. And so when it comes to that stuff, people can acknowledge that Percy's perspective is not exactly like correct all the time because he's seeing it from his perspective, but we see it differently because we're not him and we can know that he deserves better. And so I think it's fascinating that in the Calypso chapter, people just take what he thinks at face value and they don't look at it any further. And I'm like, it's because she's a woman. It's because she's a woman. Like, it's literally just because of that. Because the thing I'll like just say is that the thing in the video that I never got to make, because that girl blocked me, so I couldn't make it, was I wanted to like point out that if Annabeth ended up like dropping on some island and there was like a 15-year-old guy that was also like an immortal being on this island, and the first thing he says to her is that he was touching her when she was unconscious, and because he just got used to taking care of her, and she has no idea who he is. And then after 2 or 3 days of her being there while she's awake, he says that he has no choice but to be in love with her, and is telling her to give up everyone in her life and stay there with him on this island. There would be nobody being like, oh, but he's sad, like, so you should let him do that. Everyone would be like, get away from this man, he's terrifying. But because Calypso is a woman that's like using that stuff as a way to manipulate him by being like, oh, I'm so sad because the gods just like drop, you know, eighth graders on this island, because apparently the people I'm attracted to are eighth graders, and those are the only people that I like am attracted to enough where I'm going to have no choice but to fall in love with you. How did you fall in love with him when the majority of the time he was there, he was unconscious because his skin was almost burned off? Like, he was not even like awake most of the time. You don't even know who he is. Like, how could you possibly even know something like that?
Yeah.
And so it's just one of those things that I think it's fascinating that people don't realize that she lied
Mm-hmm.
to try to trap him there. They generally don't even understand that, because I've mentioned that in videos before and they've been like, wait, what? And I've been like, oh, let me like explain this since you guys didn't understand.
And so I have to wonder if all the Calypso love, not just from Percy Jackson people, but like in general, because in all of these adaptations, there's people that want to defend her. I have to wonder if it comes from just the female experience of unrequited love with a man that you think is just like super awesome. Um, like, because I can't fathom any other thing that people are like picking out of this story to the point where they're like, this is my comfort character and I will defend everything she does. And I think she could be written in a way where she still does terrible, groomy things, but you see that side of her. You see that nuance of she's lonely. She doesn't have anybody who loves her or wants her. Like Rick gave her a punishment to have her on the island. Maybe you have her trapped on the island for some reason, and maybe she does all of these desperate things, feels like a terrible person because she's doing them, but she can't help herself, and you get some of that inner dialogue. There's so many more ways to make her a well-rounded character than just haha cutesy girl who doesn't seem to enjoy boundaries and wants to date teenagers.
Yeah, I guess it's a thing of like, if you see a character like Calypso and you see her as like the victim of that situation, because like men sometimes don't want to date me, or they reject me, or they don't understand me and things like that. Like, I don't mean to sound mean, I don't care. Get a grip. Like, because if you see a character like her doing the things that she does and you don't notice that any of the things that she's doing is very manipulative, like people manipulate people all the time without knowing that they're manipulating them. Like, they're not like, abusive people aren't self-aware in that way. They're not sitting there, some of them are, but most of them are not, especially younger ones. They're not sitting there like knowing like, I'm manipulating this person right now. They're just thinking, I want this thing and I'm just going to say whatever I need to say to this person to get what I want. And that's like what Calypso is doing. It's like, oh, I want this person to stay with me on this island because I'm tired of being alone here. And so I'm going to lie to the gods and say that Percy said he wants to say when he never said that. And I'm going to not tell him that he can leave, like making him not realize that he can leave until one of the gods shows up in person and is like giving him attitude, and he's like, yeah, of course I want to come back home. He has no idea that any of this has happened. She's lying to the gods and everyone else, and also keeping information from him, because to her it's worth it if it means that she can somehow trap him staying with her and it doesn't matter to her that he has an entire life outside of her or like what she wants from him. She just doesn't care about that. And that's like the thing of like, yeah, I'm sure she thinks that what she's doing is justified.
Mhm.
Um, and we can like take that from future things we know that she does and things that yeah, she does think that she's justified because she does it again. And so, and the second time it's successful. Um, and so it's like she she can do those things because she's like sad because the gods forced her to stay on this island forever and won't let her leave. Like you can be upset that that happened to her, but also be like, yeah, but you doing this stuff to like kids is not like the way to is not okay either. And that's always the thing I get frustrated with characters like her or like characters like Luke. Like people are like, oh, he went through a lot of abusive stuff when he was a kid, and it's like, yeah, that's also that can happen at the same time as him being a monster. Like it's not people talk about it as if it's one or the other. Of like, oh, he's a monster. Oh, but he had a tragic like backstory, and it's like, yeah, he has both. He had like a traumatic childhood, and then ended up becoming a monster later on. She got trapped on this island because the gods suck, and then it are like trying to groom children in order to get off of it, and doesn't care how she's treating them. That they're the same. It's this. You don't have to like if people talk about it as if like one cancels out the other.
Yeah.
It doesn't. They're the same. They're the same, and like that's part of what makes them like interesting characters. But when you like whittle them down to nothing, it's like then there's what do you even like about them anymore? Like if you see a character like Calypso and you legitimately think that she's just a sad tragic victim that has never done anything wrong in her life, like what do you find interesting about her? That's boring.
Yeah,
That is
just
so boring.
on an island that falls in love with people. That's well, and so with Snape, I feel like a lot of people give him the benefit of the doubt because of Alec Rickman. It's Alan Rickman. It's not like it has nothing to do with Snape, has nothing to do with book Snape in particular, but you look at Alan Rickman's performance and you look at that Snape who stands in front of like Lupin as a werewolf and the kids like let me defend the kids and who ricochets spells so that they hit the carrows behind him and not, like anybody in front of him. When you look at things like that, it makes more sense how there's people in the fandom who are like, you know what, I like Snape.
Mm-hmm.
But you look at these characters. So Luke is going to be interesting because Charlie Bushnell is attractive. That's part of it. In the movies he was cheesy and creepy. But now we have attractive, but we're gonna see some of that slimy manipulation. So we've been talking about it's gonna be interesting to see what people say when they can't defend his actions. Same
Mm-hmm.
thing's gonna happen with Calypso, and it's going to be like, you know, it's gonna be hard to defend her. I think once
Yeah.
they see it in person, they see Percy, they see, like Walker, particularly interacting with her.
Yeah. Like when you see everything is always different when you like honestly if you want like a trick of like if you're somebody that likes watching our videos and you don't notice all these dynamics all the time until we like point them out, that's fine. I'm not gonna like act like that. I'm not one of those assholes on the internet that's like I'm better than you because I figured it out first or whatever. I hate those people. But I will say that one trick if you want a trick to like think about this stuff like and really feel it is like imagine like the cast in your head doing those things. Like imagine like Walker's little face during like these certain scenes in the books and then imagine how you would feel watching that on screen with his face instead of you imagining it in your head. It's already can be hard to imagine that, but like imagine just like what it would look like actually look like when he has to like do that on screen and you have to watch it. Like imagine what that's going to be like and that like makes all of that stuff a lot harder to deal with. Like imagine like a Walker version of Percy who I'm trying not to give away too many spoilers about Battle of the Labyrinth because I know you don't remember everything from it. But the way that he ends up on that island is just he almost dies and is like it's he actually almost dies. He makes he he's basically being attacked by things, and they're inside of like a volcano when it's happening, or like an island, a mountain that could become basically a volcano or used to be one in the past, or has the capabilities of like erupting even if it doesn't do it very much anymore. And he's being attacked by these monster things that are throwing lava at him and burning his skin really badly. And he describes it as like one of the most painful things he's ever described. And so he panics. And there's water in like the mountain, in the volcano, and he just panics and like flings a bunch of water up because he just wants his skin to stop burning, and he causes the volcano to erupt because he's just panicking and he's scared and he's trying to make it stop, and then he ends up almost burning his skin off, where he's like on Calypso's island in like passed out, basically kind of like in a coma for like a long time before he even wakes up, because he's so out of it. And even when he wakes up, he just kind of lays there for a couple days, because he can't like walk around or do anything. Like it takes a while before he's there when he can actually like walk around and like talk to her or figure out where he even is, or anything at all. Like it takes a while for him to figure that out. And so like imagine that version of Percy that's like almost died, and his skin is still like, he's still messed up when he gets back. Like when people see him when he comes back, they're asking him what happened to him, because he's like lost a bunch of weight and looks a lot skinnier, and his skin is still kind of red and stuff like that when he comes back. Like he just went through like a really bad experience. And so like imagine Calypso showing up to like that version of Percy and trying to manipulate him to stay with her on her island because she just doesn't want to be alone there anymore. And like that version of Percy, she's sitting there being like asking like who Annabeth is, and don't you want to stay here with me? Or oh, they don't want me to tell you that you could stay here forever. And he's like, I don't want to stay here forever. I want to go home. Like, but it's just like imagine like that version of Percy. He's so like weak and scared and over, especially at that point of the story, very overwhelmed by everything that's going on in Battle of the Labyrinth, that like the time that he's on that island to him is like a break from all of the other absolute insanity that's going on with like the prophecy and Luke and camp and all the stuff that's going on in that book, and like Rachel and Annabeth and all that stuff. And so like he just has like, he thinks of Calypso as like a nice break from all of that, because the time when he was on that island he could just sit there and like relax, and he didn't have to like literally save the world. And so like that's what he thinks of when he thinks of Calypso. That's why he thinks of her in like a positive way, because he doesn't realize that she was lying to him and was lying about him in a way that like affects how other people see him, because why would he think about that? There's a million other things going on. He doesn't want to think about that. And so like yeah, him saying positive things about Calypso makes sense, because he just thinks that that's just like a break from all of the trauma that's going on in that book. That's how he sees Calypso. But you as the reader can notice more of what's going on, and just be like, I want you to get away from this woman. And I'm glad that you like finally did get away from her, and that you'll never be able to go back ever again.
And this might be a really old reference for some of the kids out there, but if it is an old reference, you need to watch it. I'm telling you this as a big sister right now. Back to the Future. There is a scene because Marty goes back and then he accidentally undoes the meeting of his parents. And in undoing the meeting of his parents, he takes his father's place, and his mom is with him while he's unconscious. And you find out that he got stripped down to his underwear while he was unconscious. And you're like horrified because you know that's his mom, even though she's acting like she has a crush on him. And like that is the level of disgust you should feel when it comes to Calypso and Percy, and that, you know, like, I'm taking care of you while you're passed out thing. Because I mean, like, yes, I get giving people medical care. You give people medical care, right? But was there levels of it that like you can say something creepy to somebody after, like, hey, you were unconscious and in my care, I touched you. Like, that's not going to go over well.
Yeah. And honestly, like we'll go over the whole thing like one by one when we get to that chapter, but it is like a very good example of Calypso's a really good example of somebody who's very manipulative and abusive, but they act nicely when they're doing it. And
Mhm.
so if you don't stop and think about what they're doing, it's like people look at abusive people and they imagine them to be like the stereotypical version of them, like yelling or screaming or being violent or dangerous or whatever. They're not like that all the time. Sometimes they're like that, like, Umbridge is like the Harry Potter version of that. Like she's not like yelling or screaming. She's like actually upset if you do yell and scream. But she's the most terrifying character in that whole fucking series
Yeah.
because like I see the actress and I want to run away from her and because just because she played like I remember probably like 10 years ago at this point I went to like a friend of mine's house at the time to watch the Harry Potter movies, and every time she would come on screen in the like the fifth movie, everyone like I would like hide, like I would like put a pillow in front of my face, and like me and the other friends that were there, we would like literally hide from her because she scared us so much. And like that's the kind of person or thing that Calypso is doing too. And it's so weird to see. It's just always so disorienting when you see people make videos or whatever about her that has it's like it's just wild to see people completely miss the entire point of that character, and it really legitimately just comes down to if you actually understand what she's doing or not. And it's like that whole thing that if you're younger, I understand why you missed it because you're younger and you don't get it.
Mhm.
But if you're older and you still are saying that, I'm like, you're purposely just like not, you're being willfully ignorant at this point because you know better. Like,
Yeah.
you do know better. And so I'm not going to be nice to you when you're saying things like that because I'm like, people that don't know better will see you say that and they don't need that like nonsense in their brains because there's enough of that already.
Mhm.
And it's just, yeah, she's a lot. And there's a lot of stuff like that going on in in Bow the Labyrinth. And so there's so much in that book.
Yeah.
Oh my
Well,
god.
um, so we will put a pin in the Calypso talk just until we do a huge deep dive like we did for Ovid. But yeah, this whole thing, like, what really has me like the thing that threw me for the loop was the connection with Epic more so than everything. Because it's like if she blocked you, does Jorge like we've been asking this for a while? Does Jorge know you were massively harassed by his fans by the hundreds of thousands of views and likes? Like, there's no way he can't know if his friend that like he only has 650 on his Instagram blocked you. That he just like there can't I
It's
yeah.
so funny. It's like I went back to her profile when I saw that I didn't like hallucinate that she knew him. Um just to see if she made a video about all the crap that was going on with me at the time, and the one way that she acknowledged it was she made a video talking about like how classics people have all these different ideas about how the Odyssey ends or like where the Odyssey should end and things like that, and was talking about it and was saying like Jorge decided to end the musical here, and she was basically saying like some classics like it this way, some classics like it that way. And that was like the only way that she acknowledged any of that stuff that was going on.
At least it was a middle ground response.
Yeah,
Gee.
that's something. And she didn't use like the song in it, so I give anyone points that there's like hardly been a day on TikTok since I made that video that I haven't seen a video using that song in it. I
Oh
just
god.
love so much that I have to hear it all the time. Um,
Ugh.
I really love that just so much that it's been like, over 2 months and I still see videos using it all the time.
Ugh.
Um, anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, so Song of Achilles. So we have entered the scenes like because where we left off last week, the battle is still going. Achilles is not fighting, and the Trojans are getting closer and closer by the day. So that's essentially where Madeline Miller leads us into. Now, I have to start again with she does not care about the battle of this battle. Like she does not care about the battle of the Trojan War, like at all. And I know this because of how she opens up chapter 28. So she opens up chapter 28 with Paris challenging Menelaus to the single combat, which is a huge moment in the Iliad. It's a huge moment because it's the battle that should have taken place at the beginning. It should have happened so that we can all get over with it and bring Helen back home or keep her there, whatever's supposed to happen, right? And it is literally, so people have a visual, it is here to here. That's it. That is the entire battle between Paris and Menelaus. And so this single combat, it goes down, even though very quickly, exactly the way we know. Paris very quickly looks like he's losing. Menelaus has him by the helmet, and all of a sudden his helmet snaps and he disappears. The helmet snapped and he disappeared. Patrocles doesn't know this, but we know this if we read it, because of Aphrodite. She literally plucks him off the battlefield and takes him to go have sex with Helen. Like, literally what she does.
Yeah.
And so, and then the other next big moment is how that truce ends, because you have the Trojans and the Greeks all confused at what happened in Paris, and all the while, it's like, okay, well, what happens next? Because that was supposed to determine what happens next. Did the Greeks win in this case because he's gone? Like, what does this mean? And while they're all trying to figure this out, I believe it's Apollo that inspires somebody on the Trojan side. Hey, you should shoot Menelaus right now. You should just shoot him. And so he does take an arrow wound. It's not a fatal one, but it's one that looks bad enough that everybody's super pissed, because not only did this weird thing happen where Paris disappeared in the middle of the fight, but now Agamemnon is seriously hurt, and it was a cheap shot by somebody who was not in the single combat. What the hell, right? But Madeline that doesn't matter to her at all. She's just like, okay, how can I turn this back to Patroclus and Achilles? Well, there. So yeah, she talks about after that. Hector has a single combat with Ajax the Greater. Talks about how nice that was. Yeah, and we're getting some battle recognition in that Patroclus knows who's on the field. He knows who's coming back. He kind of is aware of everything that's going on, including oh, the Trojans were just joined by, I think it's the Lycians or the Lycians. I don't know how you say that. But Sarpedon, Zeus's son, he's noticing all of these things. But yeah, we're not getting the Trojan War out of this Trojan War story, which is kind of bugging me right now. Let's see. The thing that Patroclus is focusing on, though, as he's talking about this war going on, is everybody starting to get mad at Achilles. He's starting to notice little bits of, oh shit, they don't like us right now. They're mad at us. So he talks about seeing funeral pyre after funeral pyre. It's men that he knows personally, men that he's treated before as a physician. But then eventually they finally get what they've been waiting for, which is an embassy comes in and is like, hey, look, we really want you back. We're not doing so well out there. Everybody's dying. Can you please come fight? Here's a bunch of gold, and here's your girlfriend back. Now, when this happens, he says no. And he full out is like, yeah, no, I don't want to go back. I want an apology. I'm still not getting an apology, it feels like, so bye. And you can't help but I don't know. I feel so frustrated at this Achilles, even knowing that this is what he's always done. In every version of the story, this is what has always happened. But I can't help but feel frustrated at him here.
I hate him.
Yeah.
I cannot I cannot put into words enough how I cannot stand him. And it makes me mad that next week I'm going to have to read chapters from his perspective, because I don't want to. I don't
Oh,
hair.
it shifts. Okay, so I wasn't sure if it was going to shift or not because Patroclus has some posthumous moments
Hmm.
in the Iliad. So I was like,
The first, like, I
does
did
it
see, I
happen?
was just curious, and so I looked
Yeah.
at like the first couple lines of the next chapter, and it was like talking like from like Achilles is da, 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 and it was like from like his perspective or whatever, and I was like, oh God, um, I I cannot like stand this version of Achilles, and it's I know that this is like his the story that he obviously does, like that when they get to this part of the war that he just like refuses to help and just watches all of these people around him die, and refuses to get involved because of power struggles basically with Agamemnon. But there's just I like when I was reading this, I just like kept thinking of all these different ways you could have like changed things just a little bit to make this where it wouldn't be. It feels like she okay, this is like really if you want to like be able to for me to actually like form this into like an actual sentence about why I cannot stand this version of Achilles the most. This book feels like to me like Madeline Miller made him autistic to use that as a reason for why he does this.
Yes.
Like that's what it feels like. It feels like she made him autistic in this story to be like, oh, autistic people are really rigid with their thinking. And so if he's autistic, then that would explain why he just refuses to get involved. And I hate that for
Yeah.
very obvious reasons. I fucking hate that more than anything else. That you're going to make him like that to try to justify like the absolutely horrific decision making that he's doing in this part. Like it's disgusting what he's doing, that he's watching people die and he's literally like, well, I don't want to lose my part, like any like power struggles with Agamemnon. Oh, if I give in to him this time, he can always get me to give in to him. And I'm like, what are you even talking about right now? Like like people are dying every single day, and they know that you could stop literally all of this, and you are choosing not to. Percy should find you and strangle you to death. Like he would never do that, but imagining him talking to somebody doing stuff like this is entertaining to me because he would absolutely lose his mind, because it's just so gross to see somebody who is like revered as like a hero, and the way that he thinks he can become this like amazing hero is by purposely not getting involved in a battle that he could end himself very easily, and letting all these other people that aren't as powerful as him die because he doesn't want to admit that somebody can like beat him or have some power over him. It's purely just because of ego. Like that's literally all this is. And so it feels like she made him like, it makes me like honestly, it makes me want to like cry in like anger that she probably made him more autistic just to use that as a reason for why he does this stuff. And it's like you could come up with like you could have made them argue and fight the entire book where it would be more understandable when he got to the end that he like finally can't take it anymore and decides to do this sort of thing, even if like the other men don't understand because they don't know about this other stuff that's been happening. That could easily be something that you could do where he would still do this, but it wouldn't come off as such a horrible way. But it just comes off so like I don't even want like Patrocles to be with him. Like I'm like, get away from him. Like he's terrible. Like I don't understand why you love him so much.
Well, and that's what I was getting frustrated at. So I talked about this last week where what's missing from Achilles is the rage. It's the fact that rage is his one defining, like characteristic in the original, whereas in this one there's no rage behind it. He's calm while he's saying all of these things. And then to have Patroclus just like, okay, I guess this is what's happening. It doesn't feel correct, and because even Patroclus isn't this passive in the actual Iliad. So, anyways, we have this embassy that's in their tent, And while they're there, Nestor, who is kind of a father figure, a pseudo father figure to Achilles, tells him a story of some dude named Meleager. And Meleager did something similar. He felt insulted, didn't fight, and it was his wife Cleopatra that ended up getting him involved with the fight again by just asking him to. And Patrocles, this is where she's beating you on the head with Classics 101 again. He recognizes, like, oh, is he speaking to me? Because Cleopatra, that's Kleos, Patra, father, and I'm Patro, father, Kleos. So, like, it's flips of each other's name. He's trying to tell me that's me. Um, and it's like, okay, bam, bam, bam. You beat me over the head with the Greek in here, but it's not doing it for me because it's not comparable in the way, like, it doesn't feel comparable. And it is comparable because this happens exactly how it happens, but it doesn't feel the same. Sorry.
Yeah. I'm never gonna like a story where it feels like Patrocles is so overly passive because she makes him like the woman in the relationship. Like
Yeah.
like
Okay.
like a lot
Stereotype.
of
Which one's the girl? Which one's the guy?
yeah, and that's not really what queer relationships are like at all, but but people sometimes, if you're looking at it in a very like heteronormative way, you think that that's how it works because that's the way that straight relationships work. But they really don't work like that. That's why they're queer. They're different from heteronormative relationships. But it feels like she makes him be like the more passive, empathetic one in the way like imagine him being in like the feminine or like woman role of the relationship, except that he's, a guy. And so that's what like the storyline, this it feels like something that would normally happen to like a girlfriend or wife character, of
It
that
literally happens.
they would be like expected to like somehow save the guy's reputation by sacrificing themselves.
Was it the eclipse one in Twilight? There literally happens in Twilight,
Yeah.
where Bella hears a story about a woman sacrificing herself while fighting vampires, and she cuts her wrist while they're fighting vampires. Um, yeah, and so she's putting him in this effeminate role. The other thing that the embassy, particularly Odysseus, points out, he's like, look, the Trojans are literally right here. He says less than 1,000 paces from the wall at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says, he like chastises Achilles and says, you have eked out 10 more years of life, and I'm glad for you. But the rest of us are forced to wait for your leisure. You're holding us here, Achilles. You were given a choice and you chose. You must live by it now. Basically saying, you could have ended this whole thing by challenging Hector to single combat years ago, but you didn't because you know you're destined to die here.
Yeah,
So
like when you do that, you're gonna die, and so you're just putting it off doing it so that you can stay alive longer. And it's like it's kind of like a moment of like put up or shut up. Like, are you like accepting the fact that this is your prophecy and this thing is gonna happen to you? Are you gonna accept that, or are you gonna be a whiny little baby and put it off as long as humanly possible for only your benefit? You are the only one that is benefiting from you doing this. People are dying every single day, and you can stop it right now. And you're not doing that purely for your own benefit because everyone else is suffering and dying because of you. Literally because of you. Like, when you do this, the war will end. And you're using the fact that that is true in order to sit back and watch everyone die in really horrible, painful ways and then act like the thing that like made me like ascend to another level is when he was like, the men aren't supporting me against Agamemnon. Nobody like stood up for me when I was mad at him. And it's like, are you on drugs? Because like these men are like normal men. Do you really expect these normal men that don't have any power to stand up to Agamemnon, like the guy in charge of everybody? They would be killed, they would be hurt, something really bad would happen to them. Like, obviously they can't do that. Obviously they can't publicly support you because if they did, really bad stuff would happen to you. You have a brain, why don't you know that? Like, obviously, that's what would happen. If you're being treated like this when you're you, then, like, what do you think would happen to them if they try to do that stuff when they're not you? Like, and it's just so selfish to
Yeah.
be like, oh, well, I don't care if these people are maimed and died in like horrible, horrific ways that I could stop at any moment of my life and I choose not to because they're not willing to like put themselves out there on a limb and support me. And it's like, you're the one who decided to start this whole fight. Like, if they get involved with this with you, there's no guarantee that they're going to be protected after that.
Not from this Achilles. From this Achilles, this
Yeah.
Achilles would protect anyone taking up his side.
Yeah, and it's just, it's just,
Oh my
it,
gosh, yeah. It's
it, of course, because of prophecy is about people dying. And I legitimately forgot that Achilles and Patrocles are not 16 anymore because he still acts like he's a teenager.
yeah.
Until at some point during these chapters, Patrocles is like, I've been with him for 20 years. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And I was like, so they're like our age? And he's
Yeah.
acting like this? And I was just, it made me think about like Percy's whole prophecy thing when he's 16. And that at the end of Titan's Curse, he's like, nope, I'm taking the prophecy. And they're like, what about Nico? Nico could do it. He's like, nope, I've ruined Nico's life. I'm doing the prophecy. It's going to be me. I'm going to distract Luke with my own body so
Yeah.
that so he doesn't go after Nico and things like that because I don't care what happens to me and I'm going to do this. He's 14. He's 14 and he's like taking responsibility for this and it's like, yeah, I'm just going to do this prophecy. No matter what happens, if I die, I die. I'm just going to do what I'm supposed to help these people even though nobody helps me. Like, would you like Percy is somebody that if he wanted to be upset about how camp treats him, he would have something to actually say about that. Like, you've been treating me like garbage ever because I survived Luke trying to kill me. Like, since the end of the first book, whether it's you being mean to, like, my brother, and by extension me, you choosing Thalia over me, and the stuff that happens in Battle of the Labyrinth that I'm not going to talk about yet, but, like, there's things that he could talk about, but he doesn't bring any of that stuff up. And it's like, why is this, like, teenage boy more mature than Achilles, who is supposed to be like in his 30s.
Yeah, there's been so little character development for him that it's startling. And it's like you just know that this little portion we have not read, that's gonna be his character development.
Yeah.
It's like we're
And
literally so close to the end.
well, the thing I kept thinking about during this part that was just pissing me off was I was just thinking like it makes me really mad to know that he's going to kill Hector and because he's going to do that and that leads to like the war finally ending, he's going to be remembered as this like
The ones that
amazing
when Hector died.
hero or
He
whatever.
at least doesn't make it to the end of the war,
Yeah,
actually.
I he's gonna be remembered as the person who like killed Hector and as this like amazing hero, and people aren't going to remember this stuff. And this is like the stuff that's to me is more important. And I'm like, this is gonna be so gross that he's gonna like get away with this. That he is gonna be remembered more as like more of like the hero, this amazing fighter that was able to do that. Like they're going to write. I know they're gonna do. Like I know she's gonna do it she's gonna write like him being in a rage over Patrocles, and it's like, oh, now you care, like now you care. I can't even handle it. That like because, uh, like
Yeah.
like when it actually starts happening, we'll talk about like how I compare it to Percy's stuff and the way that is like weird that I feel like that book series did a much better job with like the themes of this scene, but with how this happened in Song of Achilles, but it's just so frustrating to read Patrocles be like, I have to protect Achilles. Like
Yeah.
during this whole part, he's like feeling bad that all the men are dying, obviously. He's not his emotions are not turned off. But the things that the motivation he has is like, this is going to make things harder for Achilles. People are going to be mad at Achilles because these people are dying. People are going to be mad at me by extension because everyone knows that we're like connected that way.
Mhm.
And so, like, that's where the motivation is coming from to, like, fix things. It's not
Mhm.
coming from to fix things purely because it's, like, wrong what's happening. It's because he's like, if I don't stop this soon, Achilles is something bad is going to happen to Achilles. And I don't want to live without him. And so I need to find a way to fix this and stop this before it gets that far that somebody just like attacks him because they're so mad at him. And it's not because it's like what's happening is like wrong and I need to stop it because it's just wrong that he's doing this. It's like I need to protect him. And ew.
Yeah, there's something about it that's so icky, and it's been so uncanny valley this entire time because it's like, yeah, clearly Madeline Miller has studied this stuff. She knows what she's talking about. Achilles' main reason for not doing anything is like that chaos. He wants the chaos untampered with. Agamemnon doing what he did with Briseis is ruining that for him when that's the whole point of why he's there. He had no stake in the Helen thing. He didn't make the oath with the rest of the men. Doesn't really even care about the Trojans. So you take away my glory, the only reason I'm here, yeah, fuck you. And you take out the anger of all of that, it falls so flat. And you're like, this is the same character motivation. It is exactly the same, but it's not. And I don't like it. So what? And there's no accountability because Patroclus never gets mad at Achilles. Whereas we have him actually being like, bro, people are dying. Can we do something? In the other one, the closest we get is he says, I was hoping to go to bed and snuggle with him after this, but we didn't do that. And I went off and went to go talk to Briseis.
I was like, don't touch him. He'll give you bad cooties. Like at this
Yeah.
point, I was like, just don't touch him. It's just, she somehow turned him into somebody that is basically being like, well, because I'm gonna die young, I, my life is sad forever, and so because this is like my lot in life that I have to die young, that everything else that I'm doing to other people doesn't matter because I'm the one that has to die soon, and nobody else will, and it's like what are you doing? What are you doing?
Ugh, it's so stupid. So then we get a scene, it's the last scene between Patroclus and Briseis. And we find out, like what's been going on with her now that Achilles refused the embassy. And she's like, Agamemnon's threatening, saying, there's no reason for me to keep you here at this point. She's like, I think he just likes to see me squirm, which I hate Agamemnon in every version. I hate him in every version. But Patroclus, for the first time, realizes that she has been a captive the entire time. It's like he totally forgot about it because he's like, I need to hide you just in case they actually make it to the ships, like, and the army's upon us. I need to hide you so they don't hurt you. And she's like, no, I'll just go and try to talk to Aeneas. I hear he's pretty cool. Or, maybe Hector. I'd probably go find him. And he's like, oh yeah, I forgot. You
This
know
is
that.
this is also a time when I like absolutely like lost my mind for a couple seconds there of like did did he really forget that she's been held prisoner?
Mhm.
She's been held captive for 20 years. She's not your friend. She was taken. She's a prisoner. She's a war prisoner. Like she would not be in danger if the Trojans came in because she's with them.
Yeah.
Like and it like there's some part of this chapter too where Patrocles is thinking about like, oh, the Trojans are so horrible and I can't wait for them all to die. And I'm like, what have the Trojans done? Like, can you explain to me what they've done that is so
Other than
wrong?
kill Helen, and it's like you don't even really care about that. So
No, you don't care about that at all. And so it's like, what if the has the Trojans like gone to Greece to like kidnap women and rape them and then forget that you're doing that and then like forget that they've been held prisoner by you for all this time and they just want to go back home? Like no, they're not doing that. They're not showing up just to be rich, basically, just to like steal a bunch of stuff for money and then leave. They're not doing any of that stuff. They're one of their their fighter Hector is out there every single day. He's not like playing these games or anything like that. Like you guys showed up where they live and they're just been defending themselves this entire time. Like where do you get off saying that they've done anything wrong? They haven't done anything wrong. You guys are the ones who showed up here in the first place.
Exactly.
Like, what are you doing? Like,
So
but that part with Bryceus, I was just like, are you kidding
they like
me?
run away with her. I kept thinking it the entire time. So we close out this chapter on a couple of things that I want to touch on. So Bryceus does, like reiterate to Patroclus here that you are the best of the Myrmidons because we got that prophecy from Edith earlier where she like said something snarky, knowing that the best of the Myrmidons in this prophecy was Patroclus. She's like that he's not the best, and so I couldn't help but sit here and be like, no, they should have ended up together. Like this is what this story feels like. It doesn't feel like he needs to be with Achilles. It feels like he needs to be with Briseis.
Mm-hmm.
And this next line, though, what we close the chapter on, it feels more like something I would say of my son than my husband. And this is what he says as he's watching Achilles sleep. He says, "That night I lie in bed beside Achilles. His face is innocent, sleep smooth and sweetly boyish. I love to see it. This is his truest self, earnest and guileless, full of mischief but without malice." That's how I look at my son when he's sleeping. I look at him and I'm like, oh, he's so much trouble when he's awake, but I fucking love this kid. I don't look at my husband like that. I'm like, oh, he's so freaking handsome. I look at his face, look at his features, like look at his arms. That's for me. This is hitting parent. It's not hitting lover. Yeah.
That's all I can
Okay.
say to that.
So, in the next chapter, let's see. We have them, I believe they finally hit the ships at this point. We can just kind of like skip ahead. They know Hector is nearing the camp, like Hector himself, the best fighter out of the Trojans, right upon them, starting to take a torch to the ships, which, by the way, all of these men, even though they've lived on this shore for years at this point, those ships are the only thing that they have to get home. So, like, if these ships go, they're shit out of luck. Like, what are they going to do? Settle Anatolia and Troy or something? No. So, um, you know, we have Patroclus saying, oh, this is after Agamemnon gets hit at some point. And so Patroclus comes in and is like, what if he's dead? Oh, wait, no. Sorry. I'm forgetting. Hold on. Where are we at this battle? Let's see. So they're starting to burn the ships. Then he says, where does this conversation start? It doesn't start with a quote. That's why. She didn't actually have Patroclus say something to him, but it's this is the moment that Achilles and his mother have summoned. The Greeks, routed and desperate without him, the sudden incontrovertible proof that it is of his worth. Incontrovertible? That's a weird word choice. But when it will be enough? When will he intervene? Never, he says, when I ask him. Never until Agamemnon begs my forgiveness or Hector himself walks into my camp and threatens what is dear to me. I have sworn I will not. What if Agamemnon's dead? Bring me his body and I will fight. His face is carved and unmovable, like the statue of a stern god. Do you not fear that the men will hate you? They should hate Agamemnon. It's his pride that kills them. And then Patroclus thinks, and yours. But he doesn't say it out loud. And like the fact that he's starting to get sick of his shit is like, okay, are we finally gonna have something happen? And we do, but it's not what you want to happen because you know the events of like what actually takes place, but you're like, can we at least get him holding Achilles accountable first? Like, please.
Yeah. The fact that Achilles is like, oh, they shouldn't be mad at me, they should be mad at him.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're like every horrible person that I've ever run into in life, or like the people that are like, oh, I'm not actually responsible for anything that I'm doing. It's actually somebody else's fault, or it's this other guy's fault. He made me do everything. And it's like, no, you're a person. You're making these choices. Yeah, everyone agrees that he's horrible, but you're choosing to do this. You could, not. But you're choosing to. People are going to be upset at you regardless of how they feel about Agamemnon being like one of the worst people in Greek mythology. That's outside of that. Like, he's horrendous. People are really happy about the fact that he gets killed by his wife. That's like the best thing ever, honestly. Um, but it's like that's that's something that's outside of this situation. Like, you're choosing to do this anyway, and that's what people are upset about. Like, everyone knows that he's a jerk, but you're acting just as bad as him right now, just to like prove a point. And it is like the worst that the way that the way that Patrocles decides to handle it is like, oh, what if I go out there and pretend to be you?
Yeah. Oof.
And
Okay. I need to
so
find out what he actually says to him though, because he does hold him accountable. Um, let's see. So what he tells him is, um, he wants to bring some light victory to the Greeks. That's what he says. And give me your own fine armor to buckle on my back so that the Trojans might take me for you, Achilles. Yes, hold off from attack so that Achaea's fighting sons get second wind, exhausted as they are. Breathing room in war is all too brief. We're fresh, unbroken. The enemy's battle weary. We could roll those broken Trojans back to Troy, clear the ships and shelters. So he's saying, like, people are getting fucking tired. They need a break, and just my mere presence in your armor is going to give them a break. Um, let's see. He also says, I feel like I need to skip ahead. I feel like he actually calls him out. Because I think he says the thing about, like, they all don't like Agamemnon either. Um, he says, what is this Achilles talking? Crap, I wish I could find it. I swear he called him out at one point, but I feel like he even says in here, nobody's like on Agamemnon's side. Everybody dislikes him as well. We all know. Just let me go in there, and I will do it on your behalf. Now, I had sent Shannon a text this week of just like, I'm going to tell you my prediction before I read it, even though, like, I know that she's just going to do something silly anyways, kind of thing.
yeah,
And my prediction with why Patroclus says, let me don your armor and go fight, is I thought it was either going to be Thetis or that Agamemnon was actually going to have threatened Briseis at this point. It's neither of those things. She kind of goes exactly with the source material. And the source material is nobody knows why Patroclus all of a sudden said, let me wear your armor, but he did. He wasn't a fighter, but he all of a sudden was like, let me get in there.
yeah.
Um,
One like side note that I wanted to say about the whole Briseis thing
yeah.
is it's stupid that anyone believes that he doesn't actually do anything to her.
Mhm.
Like, do you know that manipulative, abusive people lie? Or that they, like, get people to
I think
lie for them?
yes, but I think that they were able to manipulate him in just the right way, which is this is going to affect how people take you seriously as a leader if you do it. So I think that they're able to hold him back with that. I just don't think he would have been held back as long as it seems like it probably has been.
I don't think he'd be held back at all. I think he would do it and scare her enough to lie to everybody that it never happened. Because that's
Exactly.
what people like him actually do. They don't actually take no for an answer. They don't actually care what other people will think. They just think, I'll just get what I want and just lie to everybody about it and be able to control somebody about it. Like, if you want me to believe that that he didn't actually do anything to her, then he's not as evil as you say he is. Because that's what, like, sorry to, like, that's just the reality of men like this, or people like this, but especially men like this. They don't actually do that because they know that they can just control everybody. And so if he is actually that bad of this sort of person who likes and wants to rape Briseis just because it hurts Achilles, he would do it and act like he didn't. He would do it, tell her not never to tell anybody about it, and then get off on the fact that nobody else knows about it.
Yeah.
That's what he would do. And so when I'm reading these scenes, I'm like in my head, he does do shit to her, but she's just acting like it's not happening because that's the only way that it makes sense for the kind of character he's supposed to be. Um, yeah, and I don't know. I like that's why I'm like I know that Madeline Miller didn't actually do any research about how people like this actually act because that's how they actually act.
Mhm.
And if you just like go and talk to anyone at like a rape crisis center, if you call a rape crisis hotline, if you talk to anyone who's dealt with people like that, they would tell you that because that's how those people are. They don't care if they are convinced that they can get what they want whenever they want. And so if they think that people are going to get mad if they find out about it, they're just going to try to scare people enough that people don't find out what they're doing. That's literally every abusive person is they get more angry about the fact that people find out about what they've been doing as opposed to what they've actually been doing.
Yeah.
And like he would do that. He would do that and then think that it was funny that Achilles thinks that he hasn't done it. Like that's what he would actually do. And it bothers me that this book is so like simplistic about this stuff that it acts like that's what's going on. Like shut up. Get away from me.
Yeah.
Like stop just stop it.
She wrote
Like do
herself
you
into
really
a corner with that, though.
it makes me mad dealing with the my dad to imagine like oh all I had to do was tell him to stop and that if people found out what he did that he would be upset. That's all you think it would take for him to stop? Like do you live in a Disney movie? Like of course that's not all it takes for them to stop. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, she wrote herself into a corner with that, I think. But yeah, so and what really seems to sway Patroclus, and I mean we know his only value has come from being in the medicine tent. Machaon, who is like kind of the lead physician, I would say, of the Greek army. He's Asclepius's son, which is I don't think I've mentioned yet. Asclepius is a medicine god. So like that guy gets wounded, and I think that that's what drives Patroclus over the edge. Is like
Mm-hmm.
it's one thing for the battle to be intense. It's another thing for the battle to be so intense that you can't even triage people because your medical crew is down. Like that's a new level of intensity. So
And I will
yeah.
say I don't know. I'm not completely well. I know why. Actually, I'll go into that in a second once we're done with it. And I can compare this all to Percy Jackson of why I liked their version better. And I
Mhm.
and I felt like Rick was making a point about Patrocles that I also agree with overall about how he feels about him.
Mhm.
Um, but I was surprised that in like the myth version too that Achilles knows that he's doing this. I don't because of probably how Rick did it. I thought that it would be like a surprise that like Achilles wouldn't know that he was doing this. I thought that was part of like the tragedy of it all. Um, and yeah, I was just surprised that he knew about it because I guess part of me wanted to believe that he wouldn't let him do something like this. And it's also just like a thing of if you know that he's doing this beforehand, it doesn't feel to me as like tragic
Mhm.
because because if you know he's doing this, there is a million different ways that this could go wrong where he would die because he's
Yeah.
going out into battle as like the number one target. And so it's like, yeah, there's always a chance of that happening. And so even if it is like sad and obviously you're supposed to be sad that he dies in that way and that they and all that kind of stuff while trying to help Achilles. I get that, but it
Mhm.
just like doesn't feel as tragic as the way that people talk about it. If Achilles knows he's doing it and like helps him plan it and stuff like that, because it's like no matter what, he's going out into the battlefield, and there's a chance that he's not going to come back. 'Cause that's what war is like, and so it's like it kind of surprised me that Achilles knew about it, considering like the response that I know he has
Mhm.
um, to him dying. And it's like, why are you this like surprised, upset, like rage filled about this happening when you knew that that could be like a 50-50 basically outcome of him going out there. He's either going to get lucky and not die, or he's going to die because he's going out into a crazy battle.
Yeah. Well, and when
And
we
so,
talk about adaptation, that would be a great adaptation because this Achilles knows. This Achilles also helps strap him into the armor.
mhm,
But like having it be a surprise, like you said, that's a new element of tragedy of like, oh, we all thought Achilles was fighting, but we take off the helmet and oh shit, why is there dark hair? Why is there not red hair? Like just how you said there's the blue eyes thing. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
And it would be really, yeah, I was just surprised that he knew, considering how like violent I know his response is to what happens.
Yeah.
That's like all I know about what happens for the rest of it is that I know it's a really violent reaction that Achilles has to this happening. Um, but either way, Patrocles goes out there, and the plan is basically for him to kind of like inspire the men to make them believe that it's Achilles, to make them think that they might actually like win and not all die, and and that, but he's supposed to like turn around and leave as soon as like the battle actually starts again.
Yeah.
Um, but then like Patrocles just basically gets like caught up in being out there and like being able to do something that makes everybody like excited. Like he wants to like help basically, and he hasn't been able to help. He's been sitting here all this time watching everybody die, and Achilles won't do anything, and so he can't do anything about that. And he's like, oh, he basically just gets excited about like, oh, the idea of like being able to help and like end things. He's still thinking about it in the way of like, oh, if I do all this stuff and everything ends, then Achilles will be like safe and he won't die and he won't have to kill Hector and things like that. And so he's still doing it in the motivation for Achilles, but at least he's trying to do stuff that's like positive.
Yeah.
Um, and he ends up basically he ends up kind of getting like turned around, and Apollo pops up and does things to
Yeah.
where they can like where people are aware that it's like him and not Achilles, and um and then he dies. And the last thing he thinks about before he dies is if Achilles will be okay.
Yeah, well, I want to back up and talk about like the events of the Iliad, and this is again just because like I feel like the adaptation could have been a little bit better if she had kept certain elements. So with Patroclus, it feels like his glory on the battlefield doesn't feel as intense as it does in the source material because like Achilles warns him when he's like, okay, you're gonna do this for me. One of the things he says is, once you have whipped the enemy from the fleet, you must come back, Patroclus. Even if Zeus, the thundering lord of Paris, lets you seize your glory, you must not burn for war against these Trojans, madmen lusting for battle. Not without me. You will only make my glory that much less. So basically, like, come back. You're gonna trample with my glory if you go out there too long.
Mm-hmm.
And like that is foreshadowing because that is exactly how the battle goes down once Patroclus is out there. Same thing kind of happens as in Song of Achilles, where Achilles himself straps on all of the armor. He gives him a couple spears, not the spear that Chiron like made for him that he got as a gift earlier in this book, but a couple other spears. He sends him out and he says a prayer to Zeus. Hold on, let me get there. Now this part I also wish would have been somehow in here, because what he says is, if you honored me last time and heard my prayer and rained destruction down on all Achaea's ranks, now I once more beg you, bring my prayer to pass. I myself hold out on shore with the beached ships here, but I send my comrade forth to war with the troops of Myrmidons. Launch glory along with him, high Lord Thunderer Zeus. Fill his heart with courage, so even Hector learns if Patroclus has the skill to fight his wars alone. My friend in arms, or his hands can rage unvanquished only when I go wading in and face the grind of battle. But once he repels the roaring onslaught from the ships, let him come back to me and our fast fleet unharmed, with all my armor around him, all our comrades fighting round my friend. And then it says, So Achilles prayed, and Zeus, in all of his wisdom, heard those prayers. One prayer the father granted, the other he denied. Patroclus would drive the onslaught of the ships that Zeus granted true, but denied him safe and sound return to battle, or from battle. So that element, Achilles saying that prayer, and Zeus being more of an active participant of like, okay, I'm going to grant one of these requests. Unfortunately, it was not going to be Patroclus coming back. That also, it would be interesting to keep in. I know she shied away from the gods too much. Like literally, the only god things that we've seen are very brief and like they feel so untouchable. The gods of the Iliad are very touchable. They touch people all the time. So like, it's just yeah. I would have loved to see at least the prayer part, and like maybe something about like knowing that it's not going to come true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just I don't know. It's really hard reading this part because I just wish the thing I when I was reading it, I was like this is supposed to be like a tragic love story. Like I'm supposed to be sad that these two are going to be separated, but I'm not sad about that. I'm mostly sad that Patrocles is like giving up his entire life for this person and I don't think that they deserve it. And
Mm-hmm.
especially like them showing that he realizes that he could have a different life with like Briseus and he could be like a doctor basically. He could be doing all of these things. And like the way that the book is written, it's like it's supposed to be like a thing of like yeah, that could be my life, but being with Achilles is better than all of those other things.
Mm-hmm.
And but I don't feel like that's true when I'm reading this book. And so I'm really sad for him that he dies like trying to protect this person when I don't think that he's like the best person for him in that sort of a way like and it just makes me sad that he like gave up his entire life for somebody that way and I'm not sure that they necessarily like deserve that sort of like dedication I guess
Yeah.
but I realize that that's not what I'm supposed to feel I guess but that's like what I feel when I read this part. It just made me really sad that he's doing all of this stuff to try to help him and he's and he dies trying to do it and it's like what about your own life? Like what
Yeah.
about you as like your own person?
Well, and I
Um
need you to know that this isn't just frustrating as an aromantic person. Like, this is frustrating to a person that experiences romance because,
yeah.
like, there has been nothing to show why these two people love each other, why these two
Yeah.
people are so devoted to each other, like what their bond actually is. We just get Patroclus. I mean, I have to go back to Twilight again because it feels a lot like reading Bella Swan talk about how perfect Edward is, and like that's the only thing we get of like, oh, I love him because he's so perfect, and he loves me because he can't hear my thoughts. And like, you know,
Yeah, it
at
feels
least they
like
gave a reason why, because we don't know why Achilles likes Patroclus. Now that I think about that, but we know why Edward likes Bella. Hmm.
yeah, and I guess it just reminds me of like a trauma survivor who thinks that the first person that's nice to them is like the best that they can ever get. And it
Yeah,
just makes me really sad that he gave up his entire life for that person and I'm like there's better people for you out there though.
I see it. Like, yeah,
And like even outside of her there's other people that will like think that you're a worthy person and outside of this one person just because they were the first person who ever talked to you that way that doesn't mean that they're the only person
yeah,
that can do that for you without putting you in this sort of a like a position in the first place where you feel like you need to do this. I wanted to talk about comparing this scene to like the Percy Jackson version because I think it's really interesting. Um, because the Percy Jackson version, it was like when I read this scene, I was like thinking of that scene like for the rest of the day and I was like trying not to cry when I was thinking about it and I haven't read like so this the Percy Jackson version of the Patrocles and Achilles scene happens in The Last Olympian. You don't remember that much of it, so I'm not going to say like the characters involved in it if you don't know about it already. But um I haven't. So, I like the joke that I make like with myself is that my favorite Percy Jackson book is the last Titan Olympian curse because I love Titan's curse and the last Olympian like equally, so I just like make them one big book so I don't have to choose.
Yeah.
Um, I I read Titan's Curse a billion times, but I've only read The Last Olympian maybe like one or two times because even though it's an amazing book, because it's so hard. There's so many there's so many things that happen that are hard in that book. So many people die, that it's like I remember being like the first time I read it, I reread it like again, and then I don't think I ever reread it after that, and that was in like 2011 or 2012 or something. The last time I read it because it's just so intense that I feel like overwhelmed like trying to read it because of how many things are happening in it. So I was like thinking of that scene, wanting to cry, like remembering something that I read like 15 years ago,
Yeah.
like 14, 15 years ago. And so the way that the scene happens without giving away who it is or anything like that. And like if obviously most people know who it is. And so don't say if you watch this, don't like give away who it is so that Mandy doesn't know who it is if she
Yeah,
doesn't already know.
I need to be reacquainted with the scene.
Yeah. And so basically, the way that it happens in The Last Olympian is it involves two girls instead of two guys. There are people that speculate that the two girls could be have like romantic feelings for each other. I don't think that they need to, like because like you don't need like your friend, your closest friend, to have romantic feelings for you to have this sort of response to something that happens to them. But basically, but like I understand why some people like that idea, but like you don't what I'm trying to say is you don't need to think that that happened in order for the emotions of this scene to like make sense to me. um but either way, the it's in the middle of like the last Olympian is a giant battle basically, and so it's in the huge battle, and there's a character that does the Patrocles thing. She wears somebody else's armor to like basically run at somebody to make people think that it's somebody else so that they will like go with her, so that they can beat somebody basically in the part of the battle that they're at. But it's a much more like very tragic moment the way that it happens, because the person that's doing it doesn't tell anybody that she's doing it. She just does it. And she doesn't, and like the difference between I feel like this and like Song of Achilles is that if she told anyone that she was doing this, they all would have stopped her, because the person that's doing it is somebody that's very traumatized, that's already lost somebody extremely important to her earlier in this book, like literally earlier this same day that happened. I'm pretty sure it happened very close together. And because she's a very traumatized person who thinks, and she thinks that it's her fault that some things have happened, it's not her fault at all. In no way, it's not her fault. It is not her fault at all. And when you're reading the book, you know that. And it's this horrible, horrifically sad, like tragic moment where she does this thing that she knows is going to end with her dying. And you know that if they were able to stop her and she didn't do that, that she would have a chance to like realize that stuff on her own later on. But she doesn't. She's just like in this super traumatized state and does that before anyone can stop her. And like Percy realizes what's going on, but I can't remember exactly what happens, but I just remember that he can't like get up and stop her because I think he's like somewhat injured at the time or something like that, because he just starts screaming about how her eyes are the wrong color. And all the other people around him are like looking at him like, what's wrong with you? Or like, what are you talking about? And he's just screaming like her eyes are blue. Her eyes are not supposed to be blue. And he's trying, like, he's so like scared and freaked out and everything by what's happening in front of him, knowing that he can't stop it. It's like when you get so freaked out by something that like your brain just like can't say what you're thinking, and that's the only thing that he can say. And then by the time people actually realize what he's saying, it's too late. The person who dies in the most horrifically painful sort of way you can possibly ever imagine. Like, her face is melted to her helmet
Oh my
when
God.
she dies. It is fucking horrific. And it's like, Rick is making a point. Like, it is supposed to be because of what she feels like she deserves that. And so, like, she's doing that to herself because she thinks that she deserves that. She does not. She does not deserve that. And so when you're reading that scene, that is one of the most depressing scenes that people constantly make videos about and are constantly thinking about all the time, because it's just so tragic that this person thinks that these things, that she needs to do this, that she deserves to have this happen to her because of what other people have put her through, and that she has to do this. And so when you look at that, she's like the Patrocles version. When I look at that, I'm like, that's Rick basically agreeing with me of being like sad that Patrocles like sacrificed his entire life for this other person when they didn't want him to, when he could have lived in a life without them. And it's the same kind of deal with her, where like she just, it's so sad that that happens. It honestly makes me want to cry just thinking about it, that that character does that and thinks that that's a good idea, and then the other, like her, other person, like just freaks out when they realize what's going on. And it's just really, really sad, and you feel so bad. Like, there's nobody who reads that scene who thinks that what she did was like the right thing to do.
Mhm.
And it's not even about like her and the person being like separated in the way that it is with Patrocles and Achilles. It's not that she feels forced to do it. She decides to do it on her own. Nobody is like telling her to. She just does it. So it's not like a situation like that where she feels like she has to necessarily. But it's just like a sad, tragic thing of like, this girl deserved to live her own life and she doesn't get to, and it's not her fault.
Mhm.
You have one guess as to whose fault it actually is. You're going to figure it out really fast, but you know that it's not hers. And nobody reading that is like thinking, like, oh, this is like the right thing to do. Or, oh, she should have been doing that. You're so upset that she died this way because she did not deserve to die this way. And so when I see that, that's what I expected this sort of scene to be like that level of like tragedy where you are crying over this person dying this way and how much they don't deserve it, and how you wish that you could stop them and make them realize that they don't need to do this. And just all this stuff that happens, and it's not like that at all.
Mhm.
And I was just like, what? Like, I was just so surprised by, I'm like, this, the Percy Jackson version has way more like emotion attached to it. And like, Rick is definitely making a point about like, when people put you through horrendous abuse, what that does to you, by literally like physically showing it happen to that character, like by how painful her death is and things like that.
Mhm.
um but it's just like, why am I more like emotionally like affected by that scene in a book that's meant for like kids, than this sort of book? That's just so weird to me. That, but I feel like it did like
Literally, our
hit.
main character dies, like, and it doesn't feel, it doesn't hit.
Yeah, and
Um,
I just feel like like, that's why I feel like it's annoying when people say like, oh, you just like the Greek mythology myths because of like Percy Jackson, or you only like the myths the way that he does it. And it's like, he does it in the way that they are. Like, he took that myth and wrote it that way because he is obviously somebody who feels upset that Patrocles gave up his entire life for Achilles.
yeah,
And he doesn't, and he wants you to feel how upsetting that story actually should be. Like, he's clearly somebody who read that original story and was like, I don't like the idea that he did this, and that you're supposed to see it as like a noble sacrifice as part of like Achilles's like hero journey moment. He wants you to feel how upset you should be in
yeah,
that moment for how that happens. You should be really upset that Patrocles died this way, and he made you feel that like tenfold in that scene and in that story. Like, that's a scene in the TV show that honestly gives me nightmares. Like, imagining like that scene will probably actually give people nightmares, like watching that happen, because it's just horrendous. Like, just imagine in your head like Walker's version of Percy having to sit there and watch somebody do that and not being able to stop them, and
Yeah.
knowing what they're doing but not being able to get up and stop them from doing it when they know that they don't have to, and not being able to stop them anyway. Like he would never be able to like let somebody sacrifice themselves that way. He would never even take like the risk of somebody doing something like that unless it was absolutely necessary. And to see like Achilles be like, well, I guess since I am like a bitch and I won't get over my own ego, yeah, I'm gonna let the love of my life go out on a battlefield and pretend to be me, putting a gigantic, like, not only is it not him, it's also the person that is most tied to him. Like, if you want to upset Achilles, of course you're gonna kill Patrocles.
Yeah.
Like, anyone who's even 35% alive would know that. And so, like, you're putting the biggest, like, thing on his back by having him pretend to be you, and then when they don't even realize that it's you, it's the person that they would want to hurt to piss you off the most. And like,
Yeah.
why would you put somebody that you love that much, if you actually love them that much, why would you ever put them in a position of danger like that when you don't have to,
Yeah.
just because of your own shit? Like, what is
Well,
wrong with you?
the line that Patrocles says to Achilles in this that makes him do it would work on Iliad Achilles. It doesn't make sense for this one. What he says to him is, "There is no fame greater than this. You'll prove to them all that your phantom is more powerful than Agamemnon's whole army. Just like because just me looking like you is enough." And that doesn't like it doesn't make sense to me that that works on this Achilles. And he's like, okay, and then he just tells everybody, bring him back, because it doesn't make sense what happens next if this is how it goes down. So to kind of push forward because we're getting close to William's bedtime, I want to talk about the battle with Sarpedon, because they nerfed Patroclus in Song of Achilles so much. Letting him have his moment on the battlefield fully would have been better because it's like he does have his moment, but it feels like lucky shots still. Whereas you read what's happening, it's surrounded by Agamemnon's doing this, Odysseus is over here doing this, and then you have Patroclus slashing this dude in the hip. Then you have Patroclus getting somebody in the chest, and it feels like he's a part of the action. It feels like he's a badass. Remember, Achilles prayed to Zeus, I want the Trojans pushed back. So what do the Trojans need to believe? They need to believe it's Achilles fighting. So he's fighting out there like Achilles. But this one is still kind of a bumbling idiot and it's just like getting a few lucky shots in. And with Sarpedon, they make it so he falls out of his chariot and cracked his skull, but Patroclus just happens to make it look like he killed him. He like jams a spear into him after he falls on the ground and takes it out and like does a battle cry like, "Yeah, got him!" But he knew he was already dead. Mm-hmm. What's interesting about Sarpedon in like a version where the gods are very involved, there's a conversation that happens between Hera and Zeus because Zeus is like, "Look, I know I'm following Thetis's request right now. The Greeks are losing, but they're not going to ultimately lose. So just let me do my thing." And so they had just had this whole argument with that. And Sarpedon is in danger. Zeus knows that like Patroclus is about to take him out. And so he says, "My cruel fate, my Sarpedon, the man I love most, my own son, doomed to die at the hands of Menoetius' son, Patroclus. My heart is torn in two as I weigh all this. Shall I pluck him up now while he's still alive and set him down in the rich land of Lycia, far from war, Troy, and tears, or beat him down at Patroclus' hands at last?" And then Hera tells him, "If you send Sarpedon home, living still, beware. Then surely some other god will want to sweep his own son clear of the heavy fighting too. Look down. Many who battle round King Priam's mighty walls are sons of the deathless gods. You will inspire lethal anger in them all. So don't save him because you're going to get everybody angry." And then it's like an actual, he struck him right where the midriff packs it, the pounding heart, and down Sarpedon fell as an oak or white poplar falls or towering pine that shipwrights on a mountain. Like basically, he took this man down. He went down like a tree that got felled. So like it's a big moment for him, especially knowing that even in this version he doesn't really fight. He's mostly in the medicine tent.
Mm-hmm.
So letting him have that moment builds up, like a little bit more because that build up was lame. Like the build up was lame. His lucky shots did not feel like at least tell me a god is guiding his hand, At least tell us that Zeus made sure he didn't miss a beat, even if it's a throwaway line. Because then you're putting that interest in there of like, this is all the gods doing, little puppeteers. I hate that we lose that because it's so huge in this with like chapters woven throughout of the gods doing shit to them. Let's see. I kind of want to skip forward a bit. Let's see. Where does this pick up? So Zeus, as this is all happening, another thing we find out is that Zeus makes this happen by putting cowardice into Hector. So Hector starts trying to retreat. Hector starts acting scared and backing off. Um, all of the men are trying to obey Achilles' command to not go too close to the walls of Troy with Patrocles, keep them far away. But then, because Patrocles has been having this like spree where he is just taking down so many Trojans, he's feeling so good about himself. He sees the wall clear. That's where he's like, okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go for it. And like the way that Homer writes this is like, Patroclus, if only you just stopped while you were ahead. If only you had listened to Achilles' advice. Like the interest is so much more there. Like I read this on live earlier, and when I got to the moment where he's trying to climb up the walls, and he notices Apollo. Like he knows it's Apollo that's like literally taking him and like just taking him off like you're taking off a bug off of something. And like it just doesn't feel as satisfactory. I don't know. I don't feel like she built it up enough. Because she's not interested in battle and war. It's not a battle. And if you're gonna write about a war, you gotta write about war,
Yeah.
But I'm missing that along with the anger. And it's just those two things are so central to the story. I don't get it. I don't get what our point is.
And
Um,
I just feel like if you're gonna do a story like this, even if you don't go heavy on like the battle tactic kind of stuff about the war, then you have to kind of write really good characters and make you feel that like tension because of the characters involved and the people involved like that. Like that's what most of the time when people watch like movies about war and things like that, that's usually what gets people invested is like if this person gets involved in this thing, then what's going to happen to them sort of stuff. And you find characters doing things that they usually wouldn't do to like protect the people they care about. And so like that was really like the thing, but they didn't I feel like they she didn't develop the other characters involved in this story or Achilles and Patrocles enough, but especially the other characters even around them to like make this sort of thing make more sense and for like the emotional side of it to be there. It just isn't there as much. Like you know that the men are out there and that they're dying and that it's wrong. Obviously, you're upset about it, but like you don't really know who the other men are very well. You don't know they've never really like interacted with them very much and things like that. And so um, they're just kind of like these like 3D like far away figures of people that are being harmed, and so you don't feel it when they are being hurt as much as if you knew them somewhat and you knew what and that when they die you're really upset about it because you feel connected to these people in a way that would make Patrocles responding this way like make more sense and have it be like a more tragic thing.
Yeah.
and you're just like missing that sort of like connection, I guess. Um, and it just makes it harder then to like accept and feel it because you just don't feel it. Like there isn't like that emotion behind it, and I really wanted there to be it, but I just didn't feel it, and it's not because I'm aromantic and asexual because
I
I get
know.
wrapped up in stories
There's
like this all the time.
there's no character development. Like all of these
Yeah.
characters are so static, and like we have this much left. There's going to be character development, and like I'm trying to find where we go before all of the notes and shit. Because of course a classicist has like half of this is notes, half of this is story. What we have left, and like I know the character development's going to happen here. I also do know that in the source material, the character development happens towards the end as well. But at least it makes sense, like because we've had the thing of anger throughout this. The anger is soothed when Priam comes and ransoms away Hector's body, and like that's it. That it's a full circle moment because we have the anger starting, we have the anger being like taken out, and then Achilles can die without all of that anger. Like, but with this one, I don't see a satisfactory end because Patrocles never found himself really. Like he had his moment where he was a great surgeon, but it doesn't seem like it affected his self-esteem at all. It doesn't seem like it made him a better person. He had this relationship with Chryseis that could have made him a better person, but every time it started getting there, he stopped it because he had to be so loyal and dedicated to Achilles. And Achilles, extremely static. Like there's nothing there. There's nothing there. We know nothing about him, basically, other than he's a goddess-born prodigy of fighting. Like we know nothing else.
Yeah,
Just
and honestly, like it is a thing that you don't really know why Achilles likes Patrocles so much, and it is like a thing of like I know that that kind of stuff is not exactly like a discernible, like explainable thing, like why people get along, like why are we friends? I don't know, we just are. It's not something that you can really explain or describe that well, but it also is a thing of you don't know enough about Achilles as like or Patrocles as a character really that he doesn't ever like just sit there and talk about like why. Like if somebody came up to me and was like, "Why are you such good friends with Mandy?" I would be like, "Well," and I could like start like listing off reasons or like explain why. Um and it would be understandable to people because I've done that before with people and they've been like, "Oh, okay," or just curious about how we became friends or how we are friends or whatever. And I've done that sort of thing before. But it's like with Achilles, I don't know that he could really like say that about Patrocles because he's never really like from the time that they were pretty young, it was just like, "Oh, I just like you." Because in the beginning it was like, "I like you because you don't like me." Because you give me shit when everyone else just like worships me. And then as soon as he figures that out, that it just stops.
Yeah.
And Patrocles just like stops doing that. Like if that was like their dynamic the entire time, that would make this much more fun. But that stops when they're like 13. And so it's like after that point, they just kind of like each other because they're supposed to.
Yeah, like go full Twilight with it and have Achilles like him because he's so ordinary. Like have Achilles be like, "Oh, you're just so human and I'm not human and that's why I admire you. You're everything I wish I could be." Like that would be interesting,
Mm-hmm.
At least there'd be some substance to it. There's just like there's no substance to the romance at all. And I'm not invested in it. I've been wanting him to dump Achilles for Briseis, and then, like, yeah, it's just I'm a little disappointed in her. As a fellow Latin and Greek major, I'm a little disappointed because of all of the things you could have done with this story. I feel like developing those characters is the one where you can have the most fun. I'll give it to her that there's not a lot there in the source material most of the time when it comes with these heroes. They are one dimensional. They might learn a lesson, but they don't really change who they are. And that's because these are oral stories. If you know who somebody is, you're going to come up with an idea on the fly of a story you can tell about them. Like, oh, I know Odysseus is super smart and he likes to, do word puzzles or he likes to play tricks on people. So you're going to tell a story of him playing a trick on somebody. Like, it's part of why these characters are so static. But as somebody in a modern time who doesn't have to rely on your memory being that good, that you just have a million lines of poetry off top of your head that you can say in meter, there's no reason to keep Achilles as one dimensional. There's no reason to keep Patroclus as one dimensional. They
Well,
just
and
need development.
especially because if there isn't a lot of detail in the myth stories about them, that just gives you way more room as a writer to make up reasons on your own.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the fun part of stories like that, is that if there isn't a lot of information or detail or like things that you have to do because it's part of the original story, then that's like fun, because that means that you have a lot of room to like experiment and make things up and do things on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like that's what she should be doing. It's an adaptation. That's what usually Greek, like sort of mythology sort of adaptations generally do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it feels like disappointing that there's a lot that could have been done, and it doesn't feel like.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just really weird how popular this book is. I'm just so weirded out by how popular it is. I don't get it. Um, like I still want to read Cersei one day, but it's just
Yeah.
weird to me that this is
She
such
writes
a
women.
popular like romance book, because I don't like, I feel like the romance wasn't set up very well in it.
Maybe she writes women better. Maybe it was the queer thing that threw her off, and she just like tried too much.
Yeah.
I forgot one thing with Sarpedon that I wanted to point out. So Sarpedon's dying words in source material are he's saying somebody's name Glaucus, and Glaucus then prays to Apollo to intervene. And Zeus had already sent Apollo into the fray to collect Sarpedon's body. So that's what gets Apollo, like, in the actual fight to where he's there when Patroclus is climbing the walls. Now, I forget if she gives him dying words to Hector in this. Um, let's see. Did she give him dying words to Hector? No. The last thing he thinks is Achilles. So, what actually happens in this source material is Patroclus kind of like gives him a little bit of a speech at the end. Um, so, struggling for breath, you answered Patroclus, my writer. Hector, now is your time to glory the sky. Glory to the skies. Now the victory is yours. A gift to the son of Cronos, Zeus, Apollo too. They brought me down with all their deathless ease. They are the ones who tore the armor off my back. Even if 20 Hectors had charged against me, they'd all have died here, laid low by my spear. No deadly fate in league with Apollo killed me. From ranks of men, your Phobos. I'm so bad with the names. You came third, and all you could do was finish off my life. One more thing, take it to heart. I urge you, you two, you won't live long yourself, I swear. I already see them looming up beside you, death and the strong force of fate, to bring you down at the hands of Achaea's great royal son, Achilles. So, like, his dying words to Hector are like, Achilles is going to take you out really fucking soon, dude. And that makes sense for somebody who loves Achilles and wanted to do right by him. Just passive, my final thought is Achilles.
Yeah.
No, give me some violence, man.
Yeah.
Where is the violence in his spirit? The other just like human thing about it is I have a hard time believing you throw anybody into battle, regardless of how good they are at it, and they're not going to be swinging because that is a life or death situation. You're going to be all fucking adrenaline, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Like, it's just how human nature works. And
Mm-hmm.
so the fact that he goes into battle most of the time, I know this one he has, like I said, lucky shots in Song of Achilles, but to not have him go out swinging a sword, to not have him like actively stabbing people, it just doesn't make sense. You're in war, dude.
Yeah. And I said this like however many weeks ago, but um like people who go through abuse have a lot of rage. And so he would have a lot of rage that he would want to let out. And so it's weird that he doesn't have any at all. Like, yes, sometimes we don't like that rage and we're scared of it when we think it's going to make us like our abusive person. But in a situation like this is like the exact time for him to tap into all of that rage of all the stuff that he always wanted to do to his dad and he could never do it. Um, and so it is like, I don't know, it's just weird. It reminds weirdly. It reminds me of how J.K. Rowling writes Harry Potter, about how they write him as like an abuse victim, and he does have moments of PTSD like early on, but like he should have like PTSD all the time when he's in around this war, like constantly, and it doesn't get brought up anymore at a certain point, and it should be happening to him all the time. And so it's like one of those things at a certain point that gets like forgotten about his character, and that's just one of those things that would have made this even more effective to me, and would have it even would have made more sense when you think about it, that like he would have gotten like caught up in letting out his like rage after being triggered 7 billion times by this war, and wanting to take it out on the Trojans, of wanting to blame them, even though it's not really the Trojans' fault, but you get it. They're there. It's easy to take it out on them. They're the problem in his life at that point. Um, it would make sense that he would get like too into that, where he gets killed because he gets too like out of control basically,
Yeah.
because of that kind of stuff. That would make a lot of sense, and it wouldn't be that difficult to set that up, because he already has the history of like PTSD to set it up for. You just have to remember it about him as the book goes on. And but at a
Well,
certain point, it gets like he gets raped, and it never gets brought up again. I will never get over that. That this book has him get raped, and he just never brings it up ever again, and has sex all the time with Achilles, and that's never a problem for either one of them. They've both been raped, and neither one of them ever bring it up. And I'm like, this is the craziest world that like you could go through something like that and it doesn't affect anything about you.
I feel like, you see it more often with male writers trying to write female characters where they really fuck it up, and it's like women don't work like that, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Men don't work like this. Like that's kind of what I want to shake her and say most of the time. And it's gay or not, men don't work like this.
No, and
Yeah,
they really do not.
like we
Um,
could have written such a better queer romance. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I'm glad that we at least finished this one.
Yeah, we're so close to being done with this one. So yeah, I'm trying to think. I had another thought, but I lost it.
Oh, I wanted to mention before I forget that our like whole guide idea thing. So I made two guides that are, one is for adults, but I don't like adults, but it's one was for its abuse related things, and so one was for adults if you're trying to figure out how to talk to kids that you think are going through abuse without being a punk, and just calling CPS and acting like that solves everything, because it doesn't. And the other guide that I more like a lot better is meant for kids going through it right now. It's basically like a how to survive until you're 18. I literally called it like how to survive an abusive home until you're 18 and have actual rights. And so it's just like anything that I could think of that makes that process easier. They're free, obviously. We're not maniacal demons and whatever, like charge people for something like that, especially children. And we had the idea of making one kind of explaining general trauma related stuff that we talk about often, using like the Percy Jackson characters, because they're a perfect way to describe this stuff anyway. Um, I have to actually ask Becky to make sure that it's fine, but I can't imagine a world where she's like, no, don't do that. Especially because we wouldn't be making money off of it ever. It would be free. But
But
that's
if they
something,
wanted us to run it by them, I'd be okay
yeah.
with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still gonna do it just to like ask just to make sure since they're around and I just want to I don't know if they're there and they answer fans questions like that, so why not ask them just to be sure that making something like that would be fine and just make sure that we don't accidentally like do something against our copyright without wanting to. But it is like a thing that we want to do that. And so if there's ever anything that we've said that you've wanted us to talk about, or there's something that we've talked about you don't know what we mean,
Yeah.
or anything involved in any of that, just like tell us and we'll talk about it. We're gonna next week we're gonna talk about like golden children and scapegoats that are in leading up to Battle of the Labyrinth because it sets up everything very well. With Percy and Zoe being the scapegoats and um, Luke and Thalia and honestly Annabeth being the golden children.
Mhm.
And it so we're that's like the Percy stuff we'll at least talk about next week besides whatever happens at the Emmys
Yeah.
or whatever else happens between then and now. And we'll finish up the end of Song of Achilles. I don't think it's going to be that long to finish it, so
I mean, we should just finish it, like, at this
yeah,
point. Like, the
we're
last,
finishing it regardless. But I don't think there's like the chapters will be too
I
long.
know, but I'm saying, like, let's just, like, finish to the end of the book for next time. Let's just
Yeah,
read to the end.
yeah, we'll finish the whole thing next time so we can
Move
start Battle of
on.
the Labyrinth finally after that. Um,
Yeah, I just, like, I don't know. It could be so much better. But yeah, on the Golden Child and Scapegoat thing, it kind of goes back to something you said earlier, like explaining why we're friends. That's kind of the initial thing that happened was we realized that we have these complementary like family trauma, and so it has helped us kind of unpack some things about our childhoods in ways that is a little safer than talking to our siblings, especially like in areas that they haven't worked on themselves. Um,
yeah,
so yeah,
I did a video a couple weeks. It was a while ago at this point, but I was basically saying, like, I feel like a mistake a lot of trauma survivors make is they become friends with people that have the exact same sort of trauma as you, but then you, like, trigger each other in ways that you don't even fully understand because it's so similar. And then the friendships usually, like, blow up very quickly because you just end up doing that and you don't mean to, but it just kind of happens. But like I think part of why our friendship has worked is because we don't have the same at all, and so we don't do that ever. And so that doesn't happen. So we can talk about things the other person has been through, but I haven't been through what she has in the same way that she hasn't been through what I have. And so when I talk about that stuff, I'm not going to be like triggering experiences that she's had before because she doesn't have them. And so sometimes, in, honestly, I think we always are going to talk about that kind of dynamic in some way because I know that it's hard when you first start figuring all this stuff out to imagine being friends with the person that is like the opposite role.
yeah.
Like,
I know Golden
there's
Children, we have a bad reputation. I'm really sorry.
well, and it is like it happens like either way. Like, and when we used to make trauma like content about just ourselves, I used to see videos sometimes of people saying like, "Oh, like golden children are horrible. They aren't abused, blah blah blah." And I would always be like, "What are you talking about? Of course, they're abused." Even if it comes off in a different way, they still you can't just like say that they're not just because they hurt you too. That's just not reality. Like, let's not do that basically. um and so it is something that is kind of funny that our friendship worked that way because you would think that we wouldn't be friends because we are the opposite role or whatever in our family, and that sometimes can be hard to be like reminded of,
Yeah.
but it's why it works, at least how it started. That's why it works, and that's always there in some way. And I just like us being able to show people that you can work on that stuff and be friends with a person that reminds you of somebody in your family that maybe hurt you sometimes,
Yeah.
and but still like help you understand them without ever having to talk to them one singular time about any of it yourself, but you can still understand them. And it just, because we literally do that, like some, like I don't do it as, we don't do it as much anymore, but for the first couple years I would sometimes be like, why do they do this? Like why did my sister say this, or why did my sister say this when I was 13, or whatever. And or like, can you tell me what this means, why they do this kind of stuff? And then sometimes she would tell me things her brother would do, and I'd be like, yeah, he does that because of this, this, and this, and this. And so it's like you can get answers from people without having to ever like confront them, which makes it all much easier to do. And so I just hope that that kind of stuff makes people see that you can like deal with that stuff and find ways to like have relationships with those people in your life. It doesn't have to be quite so, I don't know. A lot of trauma content is very like combative in the way of like, oh, this person is good and this person is bad. And it's like there's a lot more to it than that. And I just hope that we can try to make that um, clear, I guess. Because
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't like how sometimes people feel like it's like I'm just gonna cut you all out of my life, and that's the only option that I have. And like sometimes it is the only option that you have, but it doesn't mean that it has to stay that way forever.
Yeah.
You can figure out ways to make it work.
Yeah,
Um,
even in like a low contact situation. And that's like what I'm trying to head towards. I know we don't talk about our personal trauma a ton on this podcast as much as we like thought we would. But with me, I'm currently no contact, and I am like going to move into low contact eventually. That was always the goal. Um, so, kind of having the safety of somebody who gets the dynamic without, like being involved, it's it's very cathartic, and it's a different form of therapy than going to a professional kind of thing, where they have to give you like the professional answers to everything, whereas I can come to Shannon and she'll yell at people for me.
yeah, and also like what was it? I don't remember. Oh, the last time I had therapy, and I was talking about like old friends that I had had that were not good friends for me. And I was like asking my therapist like, why are we friends? Why does it work with only us? Why do we not do any of the things that we do with literally everyone else we've ever met in this one friendship? And then afterwards I got out and asked her like, why do we do this? And we sat there for like 45 minutes leaving like voice notes for each other where we basically figured out why we do that. But it's just like stuff like that that you can do. Like I used to be no contact with my mom, and I'm in contact with her again and have a really nice relationship with her
Okay.
again. And like my sister and I are on much better terms now because of my niece basically. And none of that would have happened the way that it did if you weren't my friend, because I went to you. Like when my mom came over and was like, I love you and I want to have a relationship with you again. I'm sorry for everything that I did to you. Like you're the one I told. Like I was like crying telling you about it as soon as it was over, and like you're the one that supported me doing it. I
Yeah.
don't know that I would have done that if literally anyone else I knew I talked to, they might have told me like don't let her back in. She could be just lying to you or whatever. But you were just like, no, do what's like right for you, and that's what's right for you. And it's like that's what friendship should be like. And like trauma
Yeah.
friends can be like that. And I guess that's part of why I was mad about the Patrocles Achilles stuff. Is
Yeah.
like is like I feel like he just like found the first person, and I'm like, but there's much, whoa, I'm like,
Yeah,
there's
I
much
muted
better
them.
people than that. Um, Jeez, okay. But I was
Yeah.
like, there's much better people than that out there for you. And it just reminded me of me with like past friends of like there's better people out there for you if you just like let yourself find them. Like please can people just let themselves find them instead of sacrificing themselves for the first person that's nice to them? Please don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Please. Well,
I hear William getting ready for bed, so I have to get going. But yeah, we've been on for almost 3 hours at this point. So much to talk about with that strange ending.
yeah. There's just a lot. Okay. I need to like stop. Somebody left like very not nice messages, so I need to like not look at them anymore.
Oh
So,
my gosh, yeah. I've been muting people. I had one spam bot this whole time, and then I just
yeah.
had someone that said something else. And
I
yeah,
I have filters on like the highest it will go, but somehow these messages got through.
yeah. So I think that's our cue.
Yep.
So yeah, next week we'll finish off the rest of this book, and we'll talk about children's Emmys, whatever else comes up in the meantime.
Yep.
Golden Child, scapegoat stuff.
Yep.
Yep.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.